On the morning of my son's wedding, I stood in the doorway of a luxury bathroom and watched my world collapse in a pile of silver curls on a cold marble floor. My wife sat frozen on a stool, her hands trembling over her scalp, while my daughter-in-law laughed into a camera phone, screaming that it was just a prank for her followers. She thought she was creating content, but what she was actually creating was a war. She did not know that the man standing behind her was not just a retired grandfather, but a man who used to negotiate with steel unions in Chicago. And I was about to teach her that some lines are drawn in blood before I tell you how I destroyed her life for this. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe. If you believe that nobody touches the woman you love, especially not for internet views. My name is Thaddeus Moore, and I am 75 years old for 50 years. I have been the wall that protects Beatrice, my wife. She is a woman of grace, a retired librarian who speaks softly and loves fiercely. But her pride, her crown, was her hair. It was a mane of natural silver curls that flowed down her back, thick and healthy. She had been growing it out for 5 years, specifically. For this day, she wanted to look like a queen. When our son Jamal walked down the aisle with Courtney Vance was 26 years old. She was white. She was loud, and she lived her entire life through the screen of an iPhone. She called herself an influencer. But in my day, we had other words for people who were desperate for attention without having any talent. She treated my son Jamal like an accessory, a prop for her photos, and Jamal, being the soft boy he always was, let her do it. He was 32, but he still sought her approval like a puppy seeking a treat. I never liked her from the moment she walked into our home with her shoes on and asked how much our art collection was worth. I knew she was hollow, but Beatrice, being the angel she has told me to be. Patient, she said. Thad, be nice, she makes Jamal happy. So I paid for the engagement ring, I paid for the down payment on their house, and I wrote a check for $85,000 for this wedding because I wanted peace. But peace died at 8 in the morning on the wedding day. We were in the bridal suite of the Ritz-Carlton getting ready. Beatrice had gone into the bathroom to put on her robe. She was humming a song. She was happy. She felt beautiful. I was in the bedroom, struggling with my bow tie, looking in the mirror, thinking about how lucky I was to have grown old with her. Then I heard it. It was not a scream of pain. It was a scream of violation, a sound so raw and guttural that it made the hair on my arms stand up. It was the sound of a soul being ripped apart, followed immediately by the mechanical buzz of an electric razor. I did not run. I charged. I moved faster than I have moved in 20 years. I hit the bathroom door with my shoulder. The lock splintered. The wood cracked, and the door flew open, bouncing off the tiled wall with a crash that shook the room. The scene before me is burned into my retinas forever. Beatrice was sitting on a low vanity stool. Her hands were covering her face, and her body was shaking so violently that the stool was rattling against the floor, and on the floor surrounding her, expensive slippers, were piles of silver hair, thick, long, beautiful curls that had been severed from her head. They lay there like dead things, like fallen leaves on a winter sidewalk. And standing over her was Courtney. She was wearing a silk bride robe, holding a pair of heavy-duty clippers in one hand and her phone in the other. She had a ring light set up on the counter. She was laughing, a high-pitched, manic sound that echoed off the tile walls. "Oh my God, look at her face, guys!" she screamed into the phone camera. "Look at this reaction. This is gold wedding day. Prank gone wrong. Hashtag bald mother-in-law. Hashtag viral." She was live streaming. She was broadcasting my wife's humiliation to thousands of strangers in real time. She panned the camera down to the floor, zooming in on the hair, then back up to Beatrice, who was now sobbing, a sound of pure devastation. I felt a coldness wash over me. It was the same coldness I used to feel when I walked into a negotiation room with men who wanted to break my knees back in Chicago. It is a coldness that replaces anger with calculation. It replaces shouting with action. Courtney did not see me at first. She was too busy checking her viewer count. Wow, guys, we are at 10,000 viewers. Keep tapping the screen, send likes. If you think she looks better this way, she is so dramatic. It is just hair. It grows back, right? She reached out to touch Beatrice's head with her free hand, trying to pull her hands away to show the camera the damage she had done. She had shaved a jagged strip right down the center of her head, leaving patches of scalp exposed. It looked violent. It looked like an assault because it was an assault. Beatrice flinched away from her, whimpering, "No, please stop filming." That was when I stepped into the frame. I did not yell. I did not raise my hand. I simply walked over to Courtney, and I grabbed the wrist that was holding the phone. My grip was iron. I worked with my hands for 40 years, and I still have the strength of a man half my age. Courtney gasped and looked up at me. Her eyes went wide, not with fear but with annoyance. "Ow, Thad, you are hurting me. You are ruining the shot. Let go." I did not let go. I squeezed harder until her fingers went slack and the phone dropped from her hand. I caught it with my other hand before it hit the floor. I looked at the screen. The comments were flying up, the fast chat, laughing emojis, shock emojis, people asking if this was real. I looked at the camera lens. I did not speak to the audience. I looked directly into the soul of the digital void, and then I turned the phone off and put it in my pocket. Courtney rubbed her wrist, looking at me with a pout that she used to manipulate. "Jamal, you are so aggressive," she spat. "It was just a prank." "Thad, God, you people have no sense of humor. It is for the engagement. My metrics have been down and wedding content pays the most. Everyone does pranks now, it is not a big deal." She turned back to the mirror, fixing her own blonde hair, checking her reflection, as if she had not just mutilated my wife. "Look at her, she looks fine. She can wear a wig or something." Honestly, the silver hair made her look old. Anyway, I did her a favor. I walked over to Beatrice. I took off my tuxedo jacket and I draped it over her head and shoulders, creating a tent, a shield to hide her from the world and from the monster standing 5 feet away. Beatrice grabbed the lapels of my jacket and buried her face in my chest, soaking my shirt with her tears. She was making small sounds like a wounded animal, noises of shame and shock. I held her tight. I stroked her back through the fabric of the jacket, feeling her tremble. I kissed the top of her covered head and whispered, "It is okay, Bea. I am here. I got you. Nobody sees you. Nobody's looking at you." Courtney scoffed loudly, picking up the clippers and blowing the silver hair out of the blades. "Ugh, what a drama queen. Seriously." "Thad, tell her to stop crying. She is ruining the vibe. We have photos in an hour, and her eyes are going to be puffy." I slowly turned my head to look at Courtney. I did not release my wife. I kept one arm firmly around her, protecting her. But I turned my body so I was facing the girl who was supposed to marry my son in 4 hours. The room went silent. The only sound was the humming of the air conditioning and Beatrice's muffled sobs. Courtney looked at me, and for the first time her smile faltered. She saw something in my eyes that made her take a step back. I have seen bad men in my life. I have seen men who steal, men who lie, men who hurt others for profit. But I have never seen anything as soulless as the girl standing in front of me. She did not see a person, she saw content. She did not see pain, she saw engagement. She was empty, a shell filled with algorithms and greed. "You think this is funny?" I asked. My voice was low, barely a whisper. It rumbled in my chest like a distant thunder. She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, do not start with the lectures, Thad. Yes, it is funny. It is hilarious. TikTok loves it. I am going to make like $5,000 off this video. Easy, that pays for the flowers you were complaining about." She laughed again, a nervous sound, trying to regain control, trying to brush off the weight of my stare. I looked at the hair on the floor. 50 years of memories in those curls. I remembered when she wore it in an afro in the 70s, when she braided it, when the first silver strands appeared and she cried, and I told her she looked like starlight. She had loved her hair, and this girl had taken it in 10 seconds for likes. I looked back at Courtney. She was checking her nails, bored now that the phone was gone. "Get out," I said. "Excuse me." She laughed. "This is my bridal suite. My name is on the door." I took a step toward her, just one step, but it was heavy. It was a step that said I was done talking. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I said, "Get out." Courtney huffed, grabbing her robe tight around her. "Fine, whatever, I have to go get my makeup done anyway. Make sure she cleans this mess up before the photographer comes. I do not want gray hair in my background." She grabbed her bag and stomped toward the door, stepping right over the piles of my wife's hair, without even looking down. She stopped at the doorway and turned back, holding out her hand. "Give me my phone, Thad." I reached into my pocket and pulled out her phone, the latest model, expensive, sleek. She smirked. "See, I knew you would not do anything. You are just a grumpy old man. Give it here." I looked at the phone. Then I looked at the marble countertop of the vanity. It was solid stone, imported from Italy. Very hard. I raised my hand and I brought the phone down onto the edge of the counter with every ounce of strength I had in my body. The sound of the glass shattering was louder than her laughter had been. The metal frame bent. The screen exploded into dust. The battery sparked. Courtney screamed a high-pitched shriek of horror. My phone, my content. I dropped the twisted piece of metal and glass onto the floor next to her feet. It was a prank, I said, my face completely stone cold. Courtney stared at the broken device, her mouth open, her face turning red with rage. You crazy old bastard. That was $1,000 phone. You are going to pay for that. I am telling Jamal. Tell him, I said. Tell him everything, because after today, you are going to need him. You are going to need everyone you can get. She looked at me, and for a second, the influencer mask slipped, and I saw the fear. She realized she had pushed the wrong man. She realized that Thaddeus Moore was not just an ATM machine with gray hair. She turned and ran out of the room, slamming the broken door behind her. I turned. Back to Beatrice. She was still under my jacket, shaking. I gently lifted the jacket and looked at her face. Her eyes were swollen, her makeup was ruined, and her beautiful head, was shaven in patches, the skin pale and vulnerable. "Oh, Thad," she whispered, her voice broken. "Look at me. I am ugly. I cannot go out there. I cannot let people see me like this." I cupped her face in my hands, my thumbs wiping away the tears. "Beatrice Moore, you are the most beautiful woman God ever created. Hair or no hair. You are royalty, and royalty does not hide from jesters." I picked up a towel and wetted it with warm water. I gently wiped her face, cleaning off the mascara trails. I was gentle, so gentle, unlike the violence that had just happened. "We are not going to hide, B," I told her. "We are going to fix this, and then we are going to go to that wedding." She looked at me confused. "Go to the wedding?" "Thad, I cannot." She humiliated me. "We are going to the wedding," I repeated, firm and cold. "But we are not going to celebrate. We are going to end it. You are going to wear your Sunday hat, the wide-brimmed one with the silk flowers, and you are going to hold your head high because today is not the day. Courtney becomes a Moore. Today is the day she learns what happens when you attack my family." I pulled out my phone, not the smashed one on the floor, but my own old reliable device. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Stone. Jeremiah. Stone was the best lawyer in Chicago, a shark in a $3,000 suit. We had not spoken in 5 years since I retired. But he owed me. He owed me big. I pressed the call button. It rang once. Thad Stone's voice was smooth, deep, long time. "No, see, I need you," I said. "Name it Thad. I need you to activate the dissolution protocol." There was a pause on the other end, a heavy silence. Stone knew what that meant. It meant scorched earth. It meant destroying everything legal, financial, and personal. It was a nuclear option I had set up years ago in case anyone ever tried to destroy my legacy. For who Stone asked my son and his fiancée. I heard Stone take a breath. "Say no more. I am on my way to the office. Give me an hour." I hung up and looked at Beatrice. She had stopped crying. She was looking at me, and she saw the man she had married 50 years ago. The man who stood on picket lines, the man who fought for his people. She saw the fire in my eyes. "What are you going to do?" "Thad," she asked. "I am going to shave them clean." "Beatrice?" I said. I picked up the silver hair from the floor, collecting it gently like it was gold dust. "I am going to take everything they have, starting with their smiles." I helped Beatrice stand up. She looked in the mirror one last time, touching the bare spots on her head. Her eyes hardened. The sadness was turning into anger. Good anger fueled action. "Get my hat," she said. I smiled. It was a cold smile, a dangerous smile. I walked into the bedroom to get her hat, listening to the sound of Courtney down the hall screaming at the hotel staff about her broken phone. She had no idea that the phone was the least of her problems. She had just declared war on Thaddeus Moore, and she was about to find out that I do not fight fair, I fight to win. I checked my watch. It was 9 a.m. The wedding was at 1. That gave me 4 hours to dismantle their entire lives piece by piece. I opened the door to the hallway and saw my son Jamal running toward me. He looked panicked, but not for his mother. He was holding his own phone, looking at the screen. "Dad," he yelled. "Did you see it? Courtney is trending #1, but people are mad, Dad, like really mad. You need to fix this." I looked at my son. The boy. I raised the man who was worried about trending topics while his mother bled dignity. I am going to fix it, Jamal, I said, walking past him, my shoulder checking his hard enough to make him stumble. I am going to fix everything. I walked past my son in the hallway, and the air between us felt thick enough to choke on. Jamal was standing there, in his custom tuxedo. A tuxedo I had paid for 3 weeks ago, fitting him in a suit that cost $4,000, hoping it would make him look like a man. But looking at him now, all I saw was a child playing dress-up in his father's clothes. He was scrolling frantically on his phone, his thumbs moving like a blur, his face illuminated by the blue light of the screen. He did not look at the bathroom door where his mother was weeping. He did not look at me, with shame. He looked at the engagement metrics on a social media app. "Dad, stop," he said, stepping in front of me, blocking my path to the elevator. His voice was breathless, not from panic, but from a strange, twisted excitement. "You have to calm down. Seriously, you are overreacting. Courtney is freaking out inside. She says you broke her phone. Do you know how much footage was on that device?" I stopped moving. I stood perfectly still, letting my shadow fall over him. I looked down at this boy I had raised, this boy I had taught to throw a baseball, this boy I had taught to open doors for women, and I wondered where along the way his spine had dissolved into pixels and hashtags. "Your wife," I said, my voice low and dangerous, "just assaulted your mother." She shaved her head. "Jamal!" She humiliated her for an audience of strangers. Jamal rolled his eyes, and the gesture ignited a fire in my belly that I had not felt since the riots in '68. "Oh my God, Dad, it is not assault. It is a prank," he said, waving his hand dismissively, like he was swatting away a fly. "You guys are so old school. You do not understand how this works. It is content. It is just hair. It grows back. Courtney is trending right now. Do you understand what that means? She is #1 on the algorithm. Millions of people are watching this. This could launch her career. We could get brand deals, Dad. We could get sponsorships." I stared at him, unable to comprehend the words coming out of his mouth. He was talking about brand deals while his mother sat on a bathroom stool feeling like her femininity had been stolen. He was talking about algorithms while the woman who birthed him was bleeding dignity. "She is trending." I repeated the words, tasting like ash in my mouth. "Yes," Jamal said, his eyes lighting up, thinking I was finally understanding. Thinking I was finally getting on board with the program. "She is viral. Dad, look at the comments. People are going crazy. Sure, some people are mad, but engagement is engagement. Controversy sells. We can spin this. We just need Mom to get on board. Tell her to come out, tell her to smile. We can make a follow-up video where she laughs about it, say it was all planned, then everyone wins." He paused, looking at the closed bathroom door, then back at me with a solution that made my hands curl into fists. "Just tell her to put on a wig or something," Jamal said, shrugging his shoulders like it was the simplest thing in the world. "She has that wig she wore for Halloween 2 years ago, right? Or we can buy one at the mall on the way to the church. Nobody will know. The difference, she just needs to cover it up so we can take the photos. The photographer charges by the hour, Dad. We cannot waste time. A wig, cover it up. Nobody will know the difference." I looked at my son, and I remembered yesterday, just yesterday, 24 hours ago. I was sitting in my study, the oak desk, cool under my forearms, looking at a piece of paper that was worth more than most people earn in 2 years. It was a check. A cashier's check from my private account drawn on the legacy fund I had built over 40 years of sweating in steel mills and negotiating contracts. $85,000. I remembered the feel of the pen in my hand as I wrote out the amount, the ink flowing smoothly onto the paper. $85,000 and 0 cents payable to the Prestige Event Group for the wedding of Jamal Moore and Courtney Vance. I remembered handing that check to the wedding planner, a woman who looked at me with dollar signs in her eyes. I remembered thinking that it was too much money for a party, but that it was worth it if it gave my son a good start, if it made him happy, if it brought a daughter into our family who would love him and respect us. I paid $85,000 for this day. I paid for the flowers that Courtney insisted had to be imported from Holland. I paid for the crystal stemware she said was non-negotiable. I paid for the orchestra she demanded because a DJ was too trashy. I paid for the venue, the food, the lighting, the very air they were breathing in that luxury hotel suite was paid for by the sweat of my brow and the ache in my back. And here stood the beneficiary of that $85,000 telling me to put a wig on his mother because her humiliation was inconvenient for his schedule. I looked at Jamal, and for the first time in his life, I did not see my son. I saw an investment that had gone bankrupt. I saw a bad deal. I saw a liability. "You think this is about hair?" I asked him. My voice dangerously quiet, Jamal huffed, checking his watch. "Dad, come on. Do not get philosophical on me right now. We have a schedule. Courtney is upset. She is crying in there because you smashed her phone. She is the bride, Dad. This is her day. You are ruining her day over a bad haircut." He was worried about Courtney. He was worried about the girl who held the clippers, not the woman who lost the hair. I stepped closer to him, invading his personal space, forcing him to look up at me, forcing him to see the man who paid his bills. I paid $85,000 for this day. "Jamal," I said, enunciating every syllable. Jamal blinked, surprised by the sudden pivot to finance. "Yeah, I know, thanks, Dad. We appreciate it, really. But what does that have to do with—" "It has everything to do with it. I cut him off. I paid for a wedding. I paid for a celebration of love and family. I did not pay $85,000 for a circus. I did not pay for a live stream of your mother's abuse." Jamal stepped back, his hands raised in a defensive posture. Okay, look, I get it. You are mad. I will talk to Courtney. Maybe she can apologize later off camera. But right now we need to go. The limo is downstairs. Mom needs to suck it up and get in the car. Suck it up. The disrespect was so casual, so ingrained that he did not even realize what he was saying. He was speaking to me like I was an employee, like I was an obstacle to be managed. "Get out of my way, Jamal," I said. "Dad, where are you going?" "I am going to get your mother." I pushed past him. Not gently. He stumbled against the wall, looking at me with shock, like he had never been touched by reality before. I did not look back at him. I walked back into the bathroom where the air was still heavy with the smell of expensive soap and sadness. Beatrice was still sitting on the stool. The towel I had cleaned her face with was clutched in her hands. She was staring at her reflection in the mirror, staring at the patches of scalp that shone under the harsh vanity lights. She looked small. She looked broken. She looked like a stranger to herself. I closed the door behind me, shutting out the noise of the hallway, shutting out the son who had sold his soul for likes. "B," I said softly. She did not look at me. She kept her eyes on the mirror, tracing the empty spaces where her silver crown used to be. "I am not going, Thad," she whispered, her voice trembling so much it was barely audible. "I cannot go. I cannot walk into that church. I cannot let them look at me. I look like I am sick. I look like a victim. Everyone will stare. They will whisper. I cannot do it. Thad, please, do not make me do it." She turned to me, tears streaming down her face again, ruining the work I had done to clean her up. "Call the guests," she sobbed. "Tell them it is canceled. Tell them I am sick. Tell them anything. I am going home. I want to go home and hide under my covers and never come out." My heart broke for her. I wanted to wrap her in a blanket and take her home. I wanted to drive her far away from this place, from these people. I wanted to protect her from the world. But I knew that if we went home, Courtney won. If we hid, Courtney controlled the narrative. She would spin it. She would say Beatrice was crazy, that she was jealous, that she ruined the wedding on purpose. She would turn herself into the victim and Beatrice into the villain, and Jamal would let her do it because he was weak. I walked over to her and knelt down on the cold tile floor so I was eye level with her. I took her hands in mine. Her hands were cold, shaking. "Beatrice, look at me." She shook her head, closing her eyes. "Look at me, B." She opened her eyes. They were red, filled with pain. But I saw the spark in there. The spark of the woman who had marched with me in the 70s. The woman who had raised a child while working 2 jobs. The woman who had never backed down from a fight in her life. "We are not going home," I said firmly. "Thad, please. We are not going home because we have nothing to be ashamed of," I said, my voice rising, finding the steel that had made me a leader of men. "You did nothing wrong. You were attacked by a foolish girl with a camera and a pair of clippers. If you hide, you let her win. You let her define you. You let her take your dignity along with your hair." Beatrice looked down, a fresh tear falling on our joined hands. "But look at me." I stood up and walked to the closet in the bedroom. I opened the door and reached to the top shelf where the hat box sat. It was a large round box, elegant and sturdy. I brought it down and carried it back to the bathroom. I placed the box on the counter and opened the lid. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was the hat she had bought months ago for this day. It was a masterpiece, a wide-brimmed creation in soft lavender with silk flowers and a delicate veil. It was a hat meant for a queen. I took the hat out and held it up. "You are going to wear this," I said. Beatrice looked at the hat, then at her reflection. "It won't cover everything," she whispered. "It will cover enough," I said. "But that is not the point. We are not wearing it to hide B. We are wearing it like armor." I stepped closer to her, holding the hat like a crown. "We are going to that church," I said, my voice low and intense. "We are going to walk down that aisle, and we are going to sit in the front row, and we are going to watch." "Watch what?" she asked, confusion clouding her eyes. "Watch them get married. Watch her win." "No," I said, and a cold smile touched my lips. "We are not going there to attend a wedding, Beatrice. We are going there to attend a funeral." She looked at me startled. "A funeral? Whose funeral?" "The funeral of their free ride," I said. "The funeral of their disrespect. The funeral of the life they think they are entitled to." I reached into my pocket and touched the phone where I had sent the message to Stone. The lawyer, the gears were already turning. The machinery of their destruction was already in motion. I had paid $85,000 for this event, and I was going to get my money's worth, not in cake and dancing, but in justice. I took the checkbook out of my inside jacket pocket, the checkbook that Jamal thought was a bottomless well. I opened it to the register and looked at the entry for yesterday, $85,000. I ripped the page out slowly, the sound tearing through the quiet room. I crumpled it in my fist. "Get dressed, Beatrice," I said. "But Thad, get dressed. Put on your finest dress. Put on your diamonds. Put on that hat and hold your head up so high that they have to break their necks to look at you." I placed the hat gently on her head, adjusting the brim so it cast a shadow over her eyes, mysterious and regal. She looked at herself in the mirror. The hat transformed her. It did not hide the damage. It transcended it. She did not look like a victim anymore. She looked like a matriarch who had been wounded but was still standing. "We are going to that church," I told her, watching her spine straighten, watching the steel come back into her posture. "And when we get there, I am going to show them what happens when you mistake my kindness for weakness." Beatrice took a deep breath. She wiped her face one last time. She stood up, and she was tall, she was magnificent. "Okay, Thad," she said, her voice steady for the first time in an hour. "Let's go." I offered her my arm. She took it, her grip strong. We walked out of the bathroom past the piles of silver hair on the floor. We did not look down. We walked into the hallway where Jamal was pacing, waiting for us, looking at his watch. "Finally," he said, looking relieved, ignoring the hat, ignoring the pain, ignoring the reality. "Mom, you look fine. The hat works. Great idea. Let's go. We are late." I looked at my son, and I felt nothing but a cold resolve. He thought the hat was a solution to a fashion problem. He did not know it was a helmet for the war that was about to begin. "After you, son," I said. We walked to the elevator. The doors opened and we stepped inside as we descended to the lobby. I checked my phone. One new message from Stone. "It is done. The assets are frozen. The papers are drafted. I will meet you at the church." I put the phone away and stared straight ahead. The numbers were in my head. $85,000, $144,000 in rent, $82,000 for a Porsche, $311,000 total. That was the price of their betrayal, and today I was going to collect the debt. The interior of the stretch limousine smelled of new leather and expensive champagne, but the air inside was so cold it felt like a morgue. We were moving through the Chicago streets, the city passing by in a blur of gray concrete and steel. But inside that elongated metal box, time seemed to have frozen into a suffocating loop of humiliation. My wife Beatrice sat next to me, her hands folded in her lap, clutching her purse so tightly her knuckles were the color of ash. She was staring straight ahead through the mesh of the lavender veil attached to the wide-brimmed hat I had placed on her head. She looked regal. She looked dignified. But I could feel the tremors running through her body like a low-voltage current. She was vibrating with shame, trying to make herself small, trying to disappear inside the expensive clothes I had bought for her. Across from us, sitting on the backward-facing bench, were my son Jamal and the creature he was about to marry, Courtney. They were huddled together, but not in a loving embrace. They were huddled over the glow of a smartphone screen, their faces illuminated by the harsh blue light creating shadows that made them look like conspirators in a cheap crime movie. The partition was up, separating us from the driver, but there was no privacy here, not with the digital eye of the internet watching our every move. Courtney was frantic. She was tapping the screen, swiping, deleting, typing, her acrylic nails clicking against the glass like the claws of a nervous animal. She was muttering to herself, cursing under her breath, reading the comments that were rolling in like a tide of sewage. They are roasting me, she hissed, nudging Jamal in the ribs. Look at this, Jamal. Look at what they are saying, someone said. I am an abuser. Someone said I should be in jail. They are tagging the brands. They are tagging the sponsors. We are losing followers by the second. You have to do something. Jamal looked tired. He looked defeated, but his loyalty was still misplaced. Fix it, babe. Just fix it. Talk to them. Explain. It was a joke, he whispered back, his voice lacking any real authority. Courtney straightened up. She adjusted the ring light she had clipped to the top of her phone, a device she carried with her like an oxygen tank. She fixed her hair, checked her teeth in the camera reflection, and then put on a smile that was so bright and so fake, it made my stomach turn. It was the smile of a predator trying to lure a child. Hey guys, she chirped, her voice jumping an octave into that fake influencer cadence that grated on my nerves like sandpaper on glass. Okay, so I am seeing a lot of negativity in the chat, and I just want to clear the air. Seriously, you guys are way too intense. It was just a prank. Okay, a wedding day tradition. B loves it. She thinks it is hilarious, right? B. She thrust the phone toward us, the camera lens gaping like a black eye. She leaned forward, invading the sanctuary of the back seat, trying to shove the recording device under the brim of my wife's hat, trying to capture her face, trying to steal her reaction to monetize her pain. Say hi, B. Tell them you love the new look. Tell them we are besties, Courtney demanded, her voice edging into desperation. Tell them or they are going to cancel me. Beatrice turned her face away, pressing her cheek against the cold window, trying to hide, trying to find a shadow where the camera could not reach. Courtney huffed, rolling her eyes at the camera. See guys, she is just shy. She is laughing really. She is obsessed with the new cut. It takes 10 years off her look. Honestly, the silver hair was so dusty. This is a makeover. I did her a favor. I watched her and I watched. Felt a detachment that was terrifying. I was not angry anymore. Anger is hot. Anger is impulsive. What I felt was absolute zero. I was observing a specimen, a bug under a microscope. I was watching her dig her own grave with her mouth, and I was simply waiting to kick the dirt in. Courtney reached out her hand, trying to lift the veil of my wife's hat, trying to expose the patches of shaved scalp I had covered up. Come on. B, smile for the camera. Do not be a buzzkill. We need to turn this narrative around. Look at me. I moved my hand. It was a small movement, just a shift of my wrist, but it blocked her path. My hand was a wall between her greed and my wife's dignity. Do not touch her, I said, my voice flat. Courtney recoiled like I had burned her. God. Thad, you are so dramatic, she snapped, pulling the phone back but keeping the camera trained on us. You guys are acting like I cut off a limb. It is just hair. Hair grows back in no time. Honestly, she cannot take a joke. She is so sensitive, it is embarrassing. She cannot take a joke. I looked at my wife. I looked at the woman who had marched with me, who had held our family together through recessions and layoffs and illnesses. I looked at the woman whose hair was her crown, her history, her pride. And I heard this girl, this child who had never worked a day in her life, say that my wife was embarrassing because she did not want to be mutilated for an audience. Jamal looked at me, his eyes pleading. Dad, just let her get the clip. We need to stabilize the algorithm. If we do not post a positive update, the engagement is going to tank. Just tell Mom to smile for 2 seconds. It is not a big deal. I looked at my son and I realized I had failed him. I had given him too much. I had protected him. Too much. I had shielded him from the harshness of the world, and in doing so, I had made him soft. I had made him weak. I had raised a man who would sell his mother for an internet connection. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my own phone. I did not look at them. I unlocked the screen and opened the social media app I had downloaded months ago just to keep an eye on them. I searched for her username. It was not hard to find. She was trending. I saw the video, the one from the bathroom. It had millions of views. Now it was everywhere. But then I saw something else, something that made the ice in my veins turn into solid steel. Below the video there was a small icon, a little green symbol, and a banner that ran across the bottom of the screen. It was an ad, an advertisement for a cheap energy drink, and below that, a link to her merchandise store. She had turned on monetization. She was running ads on the video of her assaulting my wife. She was making money off every view, every comment, every share, every second that Beatrice cried on that bathroom floor was putting fractions of a cent into Courtney's bank account. She was profiting from my wife's humiliation. In real time, I looked at the view count. It was climbing faster than I could count. She was making hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars, while we sat in this car, and she had the audacity to ask Beatrice to smile to help her make more. I closed the app, my thumb hovering over the messages icon. I opened the thread with Stone, my lawyer, the shark, in the $3,000 suit. I typed a message. It was short. It was precise. It was a death sentence for the life they thought they were going to live. Activate the annihilation protocol, I typed. I added 2 words. Right now I hit send, and I watched the little delivery tick appear. I knew what was happening on the other side of the city. I knew that Stone was hitting enter on a keyboard. I knew that digital signals were racing through fiber optic cables, reaching into bank servers, reaching into real estate databases, reaching into credit bureaus. I knew that in the time it took for this limousine to reach the church, the world was going to change under their feet, and they would not even feel the tremor until the ground opened up and swallowed them. Whole Courtney was still talking to the camera, her voice shrill and annoying. Okay guys, we are almost at the church. Get ready for the fit check. My dress is custom, obviously. Thad paid for it. Thanks, Thad. Love you even though you are grumpy anyway. Stay tuned for the ceremony. It is going to be lit. Thad paid for it. Yes, Thad paid for the dress. Thad paid for the limo. Thad paid for the ring. Thad paid for the rent on the apartment they had lived in for 3 years. Thad paid for the car she drove. Thad paid for the food in their refrigerator. Thad paid for the data plan she was using to stream this video. Thad had paid for everything. And Thad was about to stop paying. I put my phone back in my pocket, and I sat back against the leather seat. I reached over and took Beatrice's hand. Her hand was cold inside her glove. I squeezed it gently, letting her know I was there, letting her know that the cavalry had arrived, and the cavalry was me. We turned a corner, and the church came into view. It was a beautiful old stone building with tall stained glass windows and a bell tower. It was the church where I had been baptized, where I had married Beatrice, where we had baptized Jamal. It was a sacred place, and we were bringing a circus into it. The limo slowed down, pulling up to the curb. There were people waiting outside, guests, photographers, and a few onlookers who had probably seen the live stream and wanted to see the drama in person. Courtney let out a squeal of excitement, clapping her hands. Okay, showtime, guys. Let's go. Get me married. She looked at Jamal. Babe, fix your tie. You look crooked. Mom, fix your face, seriously. The hat is cute, but the vibe is funeral. Perk up. She did not wait for an answer. She did not wait for the driver to open the door. She grabbed the handle and shoved the door open, stepping out into the sunlight, holding her phone up high, spinning around to show off her dress to her invisible friends. Jamal scrambled after her, straightening his jacket, looking terrified and eager. At the same time, he paused at the door, looking back at us. Are you guys coming? He asked. I looked at him calmly. We are right behind you, son, I said. He nodded and jumped out, running to catch up with his bride, running to hold her. Train running to be her servant. I waited until they were gone, until the noise of her arrival had faded slightly toward the church steps. I turned to Beatrice. I lifted the veil of her hat just enough to look into her eyes. You do not have to smile, I told her. You do not have to pretend. You do not have to do anything but sit there and watch. Watch what she whispered. Watch God work, I said. I helped her out of the car. The driver, a man my age who had been silent the whole trip, looked at me as I stepped out. He had heard everything. He had seen the phone in the face. He had heard the disrespect. He looked at Beatrice with pity, and then he looked at me. Give them hell, sir, he said quietly. I tipped him $100 bill. I intend to, I said. We walked up the steps of the church, Beatrice clutching my arm, her head held high under the wide brim of the hat. We walked past the photographers who tried to snap pictures of her face. We walked past the whispers of the guests who were checking their phones, seeing the video, sharing the gossip. We walked into the vestibule of the church where the air was cool and smelled of incense and old wood. Stone was standing there by the holy water font. He was wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than my first car. He held a leather briefcase in his hand and he looked like a weapon. He saw me and gave a barely perceptible nod. It is done, he said, his voice low. The accounts, I asked. Frozen Stone said every card, every account, the lease, the car note, the insurance, everything is locked down. The notifications should start hitting their phones in about 10 minutes. And the other matter, Stone tapped the briefcase. The papers are signed. The eviction notice is ready. The transfer of assets is complete. The charity is established. You are a poor man. That on paper, you are destitute. I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled all day. Good, I said. And the police, Stone asked. They are on standby. I said they are waiting for my signal. Stone nodded. He looked at Beatrice and his eyes softened. Mrs. Moore, you look lovely today. That hat is magnificent. Thank you, Jeremiah, she whispered. I looked at the closed doors of the sanctuary inside. The organ was playing, the guests were seated, the stage was set. Courtney and Jamal were probably at the altar waiting for their grand entrance, waiting for the applause, waiting for the likes. They thought they were the stars of the show. They thought this was their moment. I took Beatrice's hand and placed it on my arm. Ready, I asked her. She took a deep breath. She looked at the doors, then she looked at me, and I saw the strength return. I saw the backbone stiffen. I am ready, she said. I signaled the ushers to open the doors. The heavy wood swung outward, revealing the long aisle leading to the altar. Hundreds of faces turned to look at us, expecting the proud parents, expecting the happy couple. We stepped into the light, not to give a blessing, but to deliver a reckoning. The organ music swelled, but all I could hear was the ticking of the clock counting down the seconds until their world fell apart. The sanctuary doors closed behind us with a heavy thud, sealing us inside a chamber of performative holiness. The air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the murmur of 300 guests. But as Beatrice and I walked down the center aisle, the murmurs stopped abruptly, replaced by a silence that was loud and judgmental. It was the kind of silence that screams. I held Beatrice's arm tight, feeling the tremors still running through her body beneath the silk of her dress. She kept her head high, the wide brim of the lavender hat acting as a shield, a barrier between her pain and the prying eyes of the congregation. But I saw them. I saw the eyes darting toward us, the whispers behind manicured hands, the nudges between husbands and wives. The guests on the bride's side were a sea of pastel suits and oversized fascinators, a collection of people who thought wealth was something you shouted rather than something you whispered. They were mostly white, mostly new money, and mostly there to be seen rather than to witness a union. They looked at us not with sympathy, but with curiosity, like we were exhibits in a zoo. Look at the hat, I heard a woman whisper loudly from the third pew. A woman wearing enough diamonds to sink a small boat. Is she trying to upstage the bride? How tacky! I tightened my grip on Beatrice's arm. Do not listen to them, I whispered. Do not look left or right. Keep your eyes on the altar. We reached the front row, the place of honor reserved for the parents of the groom. I helped Beatrice into the pew, arranging her skirt, making sure she was comfortable, making sure she felt protected. I sat down next to her, planting my feet firmly on the carpeted floor, preparing myself for the indignity of watching my son marry a monster. But before I could even settle into the hardwood bench, a shadow fell over us. I looked up to see Robert and Linda Vance standing in the aisle, blocking our view of the altar. The Vances were the kind of people who smiled with their teeth but never with their eyes. Robert was a large man squeezed into a tuxedo that was a size too small, his face flushed red from too much scotch or too much blood pressure, probably. Both. Linda was thin, brittle, and covered in logos. She looked like a walking billboard for a luxury brand that had lost its way. Thaddeus. Robert boomed his voice too loud for a church, too loud for a funeral, which is what this felt like. Glad you made it. We were worried you folks were going to bail after the little drama. Upstairs. Drama. He called the assault of my wife drama. Linda leaned in, her perfume, cloying and sweet, overpowering the smell of the incense. She looked at Beatrice's hat with a sneer that she tried to disguise as a smile. Beatrice. Dear, that hat is certainly a statement, she said, her voice dripping with passive aggression. But honestly, do not. You think it is a bit much for an indoor ceremony? You are blocking the view for the VIPs behind you. I stood up slowly, unfolding my frame until I was looking down at Robert Vance. I am 6'2", and I have spent my life making steel bend to my will. Robert took a half step back, his confidence faltering for a second. My wife is wearing the hat, I said. my voice low and level. Linda let out a shrill little laugh. "Oh, come on, Thad. Do not be so serious. Courtney told us what happened. It was just a prank, a little fun for the internet. You people are so sensitive. Honestly, it is just hair. It grows back. Let the kids have their fun." You people. I knew what she meant. I knew exactly what that phrase carried. I had heard it in boardrooms. I had heard it on the street, and I heard it now in the house of God. "Your daughter shaved my wife's head," I said, trying to keep the rage from turning into violence. She humiliated her. Robert waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, stop it, Thad. She is an influencer. That is what they do. It is all for show. Nobody got hurt. Besides, Courtney is just high-spirited. She wants to be famous. You should be supporting that instead of making a scene." He stepped closer, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Look, Thad, we have some very important people here today. Investors, partners, people who can help Courtney's career. Do not ruin the vibe. Okay, tell Beatrice to lose the hat, or at least sit further back so she is not in the shots. We want this to look perfect." I looked at this man who thought dignity was something you could trade for a networking opportunity, and I felt a wave of disgust so potent it almost made me dizzy. He thought he was rich. He thought he was powerful. He was bragging about the wedding, about the luxury, about the cost. "It is a beautiful setup, isn't it?" Robert said, gesturing around the church at the elaborate floral arrangements that lined the aisle, thousands of white orchids and roses cascading from gold stands, top-tier stuff. "Thad, only the best for my little girl," I told the planner. "Spare no expense." He puffed out his chest, looking at the flowers with the pride of a man who thinks he provided them. "Spare no expense." I looked at the orchids, I looked at the roses, and I remembered yesterday afternoon I was sitting in my car outside the florist's warehouse. The phone pressed to my ear, listening to the wedding planner, hyperventilating on the other end. "Mr. Moore," she had said, her voice panicking, "we have a problem. The card for the flowers was declined. We tried to run it 3 times. The bank says insufficient funds. The florist says if we do not have a cashier's check in an hour, the trucks do not leave. It was Jamal's card. It was the card I gave him, an allowance on a card with a limit that should have been enough, but clearly they had maxed it out on something else, probably on Courtney's vanity." How much I had asked the planner? $15,000, she said, for the church and the reception hall. $15,000 for flowers that would die in 24 hours. I could have let it fail. I could have let them walk down a bare aisle. I could have let the Vances see that their son-in-law was broke, that their daughter was marrying a man who was living on his father's credit. But I did not. I was still a father. Then I was still protecting them. I drove to the bank. I got the check. I drove to the warehouse, and I handed it to the driver. I saved the day. I saved their image. I saved Robert Vance. The embarrassment of a budget wedding. And here he stood, taking credit for my money, taking credit for my sacrifice while insulting my wife. I looked at Robert and I smiled. It was the smile of a predator who knows the trap has already snapped shut. "It is very impressive, Robert," I said, my voice smooth. "Truly a display of wealth." Robert beamed, missing the irony. Completely. Absolutely. "We Vances know how to throw a party. Enjoy the show, Thad, and seriously, tell her to ditch the hat." He patted my shoulder, a condescending heavy pat, and walked away, pulling Linda with him. They sashayed to the front pew on the other side, sitting down like they owned the building. I sat back down next to Beatrice. She reached out and took my hand, her fingers squeezing mine. "They are awful," she whispered. "They are temporary," I said. The music swelled, the organ piping out a triumphant march. The doors at the back of the church opened, and the procession began. I watched my son walk down the aisle. He looked handsome on the outside, but I knew the rot that was on the inside. He walked with a swagger that was unearned, smiling at the guests, waving like a celebrity. He did not look at us. He did not look at his mother. He walked past us, his eyes fixed on the altar, his mind probably fixed on the follower count. Then came the bridesmaids, a flock of girls in dresses that cost more than my first house, holding bouquets of the flowers I had paid for, giggling, winking at the groomsmen. And then the doors opened wide and Courtney appeared. The guests gasped, whispering about how beautiful she looked. I saw a monster in white lace. She was holding a bouquet of white orchids. My orchids. She was smiling that bright fake smile. Playing to the cameras that were positioned around the church, she was walking slowly, milking the moment, savoring the attention. She walked past us, and for a split second she looked down at Beatrice. She saw the hat, she saw the veil, and she smirked, a tiny, cruel twisting of her lips, a victory lap. I squeezed Beatrice's hand. "Hold on," I whispered. "Just a little longer." The ceremony was a farce. The priest spoke about love, about honor, about cherishing one another in sickness and in health. I watched them stand there, holding hands, pretending to be human beings. Jamal recited his vows, promising to protect her, promising to provide for her. I almost laughed out loud. Provide with what? Jamal with the money. I just cut off with the house I just evicted you from, with the job you do not have. Courtney recited her vows, looking not at Jamal, but over his shoulder, at the photographer, making sure she was in her good light. "I promise to love you," she said, her voice trembling with fake emotion. "I promise to be promised to your partner, your best friend." Lies, every word a lie. She did not want a partner. She wanted a sponsor. She did not want a husband. She wanted a cameraman. I looked at my watch. It was 1:45. The reception started at 3. That was when the bomb would go off. That was when the reality would crash into their fantasy. I looked over at the Vances. Robert was crying, wiping his eyes with a silk handkerchief. Linda was recording on her phone, broadcasting the wedding to her own followers. They were so proud, so smug, so oblivious. They did not know that the flowers they were admiring were paid for by the man they had just insulted. They did not know that the champagne they would drink in an hour was paid for by the woman they had called a drama queen. They did not know that their VIP guests, the investors and partners they were trying to impress, were about to witness the dismantling of their family name. The priest pronounced them man and wife. "You may kiss the bride," he said. Jamal leaned in, kissed her. It was a performance, a kiss for the show. Courtney popped her foot up like a movie star. The guests cheered. The applause was thunderous. They turned to face the congregation, beaming triumphant. They thought they had won. They thought they had gotten away with it. They thought the hat was just a hat, and the silence was just submission. They walked back up the aisle, hand in hand, flower petals raining down on them. I stood up, pulling Beatrice up with me. We turned to follow them out of the church. Robert Vance leaned across the aisle as we passed. "See Thad," he whispered, loud enough for the people around us to hear. "Beautiful ceremony worth every penny, right?" I stopped. I looked at him. I looked at the flowers I had bought, the dress. I had bought the suit. I had bought the life I had bought. Worth every penny. "Robert," I said. I adjusted my tie. I checked my pocket for my phone. The message from Stone was there. The police were on standby. I looked at Beatrice under her hat. She was dry-eyed now. She was ready. "Let's go to the party," I said to her. We walked out into the sunlight, blinking against the brightness. The limo was waiting. The driver held the door open. We got in, sitting in the same seats, but the atmosphere had changed. The air was no longer cold with humiliation. It was electric with anticipation. I pulled out my phone and sent one last text to Stone. "We are coming." I looked out the window as the limo pulled away, following the Rolls-Royce that carried the happy couple. "Enjoy the ride, son," I thought, watching the back of their car. "It is the last free ride you will ever take." The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal chandeliers, a monument to excess that I had paid for with the sweat of 40 years in the steel industry. The air was cold, conditioned to a perfect 68 degrees, but it felt suffocatingly hot to me. Thick with the scent of roasted squab and expensive perfume. The round tables were draped in silk. The centerpieces were towering structures of white orchids and hydrangeas that cost more than my first car. And everywhere I looked, I saw strangers. I saw people I did not know, eating food I had paid for, drinking champagne that flowed from bottles I had purchased, laughing with mouths full of cake that was baked on my dime. The Vances were holding court at the table next to ours. Robert was loosening his bow tie, his face red and shiny with alcohol, holding a glass of scotch and gesturing wildly to a group of men in suits. Men he called investors, men who looked like sharks in human skin. Linda was fluttering between tables, showing off her diamond bracelet, the one she claimed was a family heirloom, but I knew was bought on credit 3 months ago. I sat at the head table, the place of honor, that felt like a pillory next to me. Beatrice sat like a statue made of ice and sorrow. She had not touched her food. She had not taken a sip of water. She just sat there with her hands folded in her lap, staring at the white tablecloth beneath the brim of her lavender hat. The hat was beautiful. It was elegant. But to me, it was a bandage covering a wound that was still bleeding. Jamal and Courtney sat in the center of the dais, looking out over their kingdom, like royalty. Courtney had changed into a second dress, something slinky and sparkling that looked more like a disco ball than a wedding gown. She was constantly checking her phone propped up against a crystal goblet, monitoring the live stream, monitoring the comments, feeding on the attention like a vampire feeds on blood. Jamal was laughing, drinking, throwing his head. Back basking in the glow of her spotlight, he looked happy. And that happiness twisted a knife in my gut because it was built on the ruins of his mother's dignity. He was celebrating while the woman who birthed him sat 3 feet away, trembling with shame. The DJ, a man with too much energy in a shiny suit, lowered the music. The thumping bass faded away, replaced by an expectant hush. "All right, everyone," the DJ announced, his voice booming through the speakers. "Let's give it up for the beautiful bride. She has a special surprise for everyone tonight, a little treat for her guests and her new family." The guests clapped politely. The Vances cheered loudly, whistling and stomping their feet like they were at a rodeo. Courtney stood up holding a microphone. She beamed at the crowd, waving her hand for silence. She looked at me, then she looked at Beatrice, and her smile widened. It was a smile of pure malice disguised as joy. "Hey guys," she chirped, and her voice echoed off the high ceilings. "Hey everyone, thank you so much for coming. It means the world to us. Seriously, we are trending right now. Did you know that we are #1 on the platform? So give yourselves a round of applause." The room clapped again, louder this time, fueled by the alcohol and the proximity to internet fame. So, Courtney continued walking around the table, stepping out onto the dance floor, commanding the room like a circus ringmaster. A lot of you have been asking about the video that went viral this morning. The prank video. You know the one. A ripple of laughter went through the room. Nervous laughter mixed with genuine amusement. People pulled out their phones, ready to record. "Well," Courtney said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "there has been some drama. Some haters saying mean things. Saying I was mean to my mother-in-law. But I want to set the record straight right now in front of everyone. I want to show you the full clip, the director's cut, and I want to explain what really happened." She pointed to the far wall, too, where a massive projection screen began to lower from the ceiling. I felt Beatrice stiffen beside me. Her hand gripped my wrist, her nails digging into my skin through my suit jacket. "Thad," she whispered, panic rising in her throat. "Thad, no, please do not let them." I started to stand up, but Courtney was faster. She signaled the DJ, and the lights in the ballroom went dark, plunging us into shadow. The only light came from the massive screen that flickered to life, and there it was. High definition, 10 feet tall, projected for 300 people to see the inside of the hotel bathroom. The sound system was concert quality, so when the video started, the sound of the electric clippers sounded like a chainsaw ripping through the silence of the room. Buzz, buzz, buzz. On the screen, my wife sat on the stool, looking small and terrified. The camera zoomed in on her face, capturing every wrinkle of fear, every tear that leaked from her eyes. And then the clippers moved. I watched in horror as the audience watched my wife being assaulted. The razor cut through her silver curls, the hair falling in slow motion on the big screen, drifting down like snow. Courtney on the screen was laughing, narrating the carnage. "Look at that, guys. Bye-bye. Granny hair, time for a glow-up." The audience in the ballroom gasped. At first, a collective intake of breath, but then Courtney, the real Courtney, standing on the dance floor, laughed into the microphone. "Look at her," she shouted over the video. "Look at Bea. She is such a good sport." On the screen, Beatrice was crying, begging her to stop, saying no, please no. In the ballroom, the real Beatrice let out a sound that I will never forget. It was a whimper, a sound of pure brokenness. She slumped forward, her head hitting the table, her forehead resting on the expensive linen, her wide-brimmed hat tilting precariously, hiding her face completely, hiding her shame from the monsters who were watching it as entertainment. Courtney paused the video right at the moment where Beatrice was sobbing with half her head shaved, exposing the pale, vulnerable scalp. She turned to the crowd, the light from the screen illuminating her face, making her look like a demon. "I know it looks intense, guys," she said, her voice taking on that fake, sincere tone that influencers use when they are caught doing something terrible. "But I want you to know that Beatrice did this for me. She sacrificed her hair to support my channel. She knew I needed a viral moment. She knew we needed the engagement. So she sat down and she let me do it. She gave up her vanity to help her daughter-in-law succeed. She walked over to our table, standing right in front of Beatrice, who was still face down on the tablecloth. "Isn't that right, Bea?" Courtney asked, leaning down the microphone close to my wife's head. "Say hello to the people. Tell them how much you support the hustle. Tell them it was a sacrifice of love." The room was silent for a heartbeat, waiting to see if the old woman would lift her head, waiting to see if she would play along. And then, from the center of the dais, a sound broke the tension. It was laughter. It was Jamal. My son was laughing. He was clapping his hands, shaking his head, looking at his wife with admiration. "That is my girl," he shouted, raising his glass. "She is a marketing genius. Give it up for Mom, guys. She took one for the team. Look at those views. We are going to be rich." He was laughing at his mother. He was laughing at her pain. He was laughing at the violation of her body. He was clapping for the woman who had stripped his mother of her pride. The guests, seeing the groom laugh, decided it was okay. They started to laugh too. A few at first, then more, until the room was filled with a roar of applause and laughter. People were whistling, cheering, shouting, "Bravo!" Robert Vance was slapping the table, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. Linda was recording Beatrice's slumped form, probably live streaming the aftermath. I sat there in the dark, surrounded by the sound of 300 people mocking. The woman I loved. The woman I had sworn to protect. I felt the vibration of Beatrice's sobs against my arm. She was shaking apart. She was disintegrating under the weight of their cruelty. And something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was the sound of a heavy steel cable finally breaking under too much tension. It was the sound of the last tether to my patience severing. I did not look at Jamal. I did not look at Courtney. I looked at Beatrice's hat. The beautiful lavender hat that was now crooked and sad. I stood up. I am a big man. I have broad shoulders from years of labor. I have a presence that can fill a room when I want to. I buttoned my tuxedo jacket slowly, deliberately. My movements precise and calm amidst the chaos. The people at the nearby tables noticed me. First, they saw me stand up and the laughter died in their throats. They saw my face and they stopped cheering. I did not pick up a champagne glass to make a toast. I did not pick up a knife to tap against crystal. Walked around the table, moving with the unstoppable momentum of a freight train. I walked past Beatrice, placing a hand gently on her shoulder for just a second. A silent promise. I walked down the steps of the dais onto the dance floor. Courtney saw me coming. She lowered the microphone slightly, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second. But she recovered quickly. She thought this was part of the show. She thought I was coming to join the skit. "Oh, look, guys," she said into the mic. "Here comes Thad. Maybe he wants a haircut, too." The crowd laughed again, nervous titters. I did not stop walking. I walked straight up to her. She was wearing 4-inch heels, but I still towered over her. I looked down into her eyes and I saw the emptiness there, the vast, shallow pool of her narcissism. "Give me the microphone," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried. It cut through the laughter like a blade. Courtney blinked, confused. Excuse me, Thad. We are in the middle of a bit. Go sit down." I did not ask. Again, I reached out and I took the microphone from her hand. I did not snatch it. I simply took it with a force that she could not resist. She tried to hold on, but her grip was nothing against mine. "Hey," she protested, stepping back, rubbing her hand. "What is your problem? You are ruining the vibe again." I turned away from her. I turned to face the room. I turned to face the 300 guests, the investors, the partners, the friends, the family. I looked at the big screen where the frozen image of my weeping wife still loomed large, 10 feet high, a monument to their cruelty. I looked at the head table where Jamal was still smiling, his glass raised halfway to his mouth, his smile freezing as he saw me standing there. I raised the microphone to my lips. The feedback whined for a split second, a sharp, piercing sound that silenced the last of the whispers. The room went dead quiet. I looked at them all. I looked at the Vances. I looked at the strangers eating my food. I looked at my son. "You find this funny?" I asked. My voice rumbled through the massive speakers, deep and resonant. It was the voice I used to use when I told factory owners that the strike was not ending until my men got paid. "You think seeing a 72-year-old woman humiliated is entertainment?" I gestured to the screen behind me without looking at it. You applaud this, I said, my voice rising slightly. You drink champagne and you laugh while a girl who has never worked a day in her life mutilates a woman who has worked every day of hers. Courtney tried to grab the mic back, reaching for my arm. Thad, stop it. Seriously, stop it right now. You are embarrassing us. I shoved her away with one arm, a backward motion that sent her stumbling in her high heels. She fell onto the dance floor in a heap of white tulle and sequins. A gasp went through the room. I did not look down at her. She says, "My wife made a sacrifice," I said, looking directly at Jamal, who was now standing up, looking pale. She says, "Beatrice did this for love," she says. "She did this to support the hustle." I reached into my inner pocket and I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was not a speech, it was a spreadsheet, a single sheet of paper that Stone had handed me in the vestibule of the church. "Let us talk about sacrifice," I said, my voice booming, filling every corner of the room. "Let us talk about support." I unfolded the paper. "Let us talk about exactly how much support this family has given to the circus you see before you." I looked at Jamal and I saw the terror in his eyes. He knew what was on that paper. He knew that the free ride was about to hit a brick wall. "Dad." "No," he shouted, his voice cracking without the amplification of a microphone. "Dad, do not do this! Sit down, Jamal!" I roared into the mic, my voice thundering like the voice of God. "Sit down and listen because the bill has come due and I am the one collecting." I stepped over the pile of white tulle and sequins that was my daughter-in-law lying on the dance floor. I did not look down at her. I did not offer her a hand to help her up. I stepped over her like one steps over a puddle of dirty water on a Chicago sidewalk. I heard her gasp. I heard her whimper. But those sounds were meaningless to me. Now they were just background noise static in a signal that had finally become crystal clear. I walked up the 3 steps to the center of the stage where the band had stopped playing. The lead singer, a young man in a tuxedo, was holding his saxophone, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. I nodded to him, a silent dismissal. He backed away, giving me the floor, giving me the spotlight, giving me the pulpit. I stood in the center of the dais, the microphone heavy and cool in my hand behind me. The massive projection screen still displayed the frozen image of my wife weeping, her hands covering her shorn head, the pixels capturing her agony in high definition 10 feet tall, towering over the room like a ghost of Christmas past. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. 300 people held their breath. The waiters stopped pouring wine. The kitchen staff peeked out from the swinging doors. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause in anticipation. They were waiting for the explosion. They were waiting for the angry old man to lose his temper, to scream, to be escorted out by security. But I did not scream. I looked out at the sea of faces. I looked at the Vances sitting in the front row. Robert was purple, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from the lake. Linda was clutching her pearls, her eyes darting around, looking for an exit, looking for a way to distance herself from the disaster she helped create. I looked at the investors, the partners, the VIPs, the people Robert Vance had spent all day trying to impress. They were looking at me with curiosity. They were sharks, recognizing another predator entering the water. I looked at Jamal, my son, who was standing by his chair, his hands gripping the back of it so hard his knuckles were white. He was shaking, his eyes locked on me, pleading, begging me with his silence to stop, to sit down, to let the humiliation continue for the sake of his image. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the expensive lilies and the fear in the room. "Welcome," I said. My voice was low, smooth. It rolled over the crowd like a wave of molasses, heavy and dark. "Welcome to the wedding of the century. Isn't that what the hashtag says?" I paused, letting the question hang in the air. We are gathered here to celebrate love, honor, and family. At least that is what the invitation said. That is what the priest said an hour ago. I walked slowly to the edge of the stage, looking down at the guests. But I am a man who believes in truth. I spent 40 years negotiating contracts. I spent 40 years looking at the fine print, finding the lies hidden in the legal language. And today, I found a lie so big, it filled a cathedral. Turned slightly, pointing a finger back at the screen behind me without looking at it. "You all laughed at this," I said, my voice hardening just a fraction. "You saw a woman stripped of her dignity and you applauded. You saw an assault and you called it content." Courtney was scrambling to her feet, now helped up by one of her bridesmaids. She was disheveled, her mascara running, but her mouth was moving. She was shouting something, but without the microphone, she was just a mime screaming into a hurricane. "Thad, stop it!" she screeched. "Sit down! You are drunk!" I ignored her completely. I did not even blink. She says, "This was a prank." I continued addressing the room, addressing the investors, addressing the world. She says, "My wife Beatrice Moore, a woman who has forgotten more about class than this girl will ever know." She says Beatrice volunteered for this. She says Beatrice made a sacrifice. I let out a short, dry laugh. It was a sound devoid of humor. Sacrifice. I know that word. I know it intimately. Sacrifice is working double shifts in a foundry when it is 20 degrees below zero, so your son can have braces. Sacrifice is wearing the same coat for 10 years, so your wife can have a warm house. Sacrifice is swallowing your pride when a man calls you a boy, so you do not lose the paycheck that feeds your family. That is sacrifice. I looked down at Courtney, who is now standing at the foot of the stage, glaring up at me, hate radiating from her eyes. "You say my wife made a sacrifice?" I asked her, my voice dropping to a whisper that echoed like a gunshot through the speakers. "No. My wife was assaulted." The word hung there, heavy and undeniable. "She was assaulted in a hotel room. She was held hostage by your vanity. She was mutilated for your amusement and for the amusement of strangers on the internet. And today, right now, I will show you what true sacrifice looks like." I turned to look at the Vances. Robert was standing up now, making a cut at motion with his hand, trying to signal the sound technician to cut my mic. "Sit down, Robert," I said, my voice booming, commanding. The sound technician did not cut the mic. The sound technician worked for the production company, and the production company was paid by me. He knew who signed the checks. I said, "Sit down." Robert froze. He looked around, realizing he had no power here, realizing that his bluster and his borrowed suits meant nothing against the reality of the situation. He sat down slowly, sinking into his chair. I looked back at the crowd. "You want to talk about support," I said. "You want to talk about how much this family has supported the hustle. Well, let us look at the ledger. Let us look at the receipts, because unlike my daughter-in-law, I do not deal in feelings. I do not deal in vibes. I deal in hard currency." I raised my hand, a signal to the back of the room where Stone was standing next to the projectionist. Stone, my lawyer, the Grim Reaper in a charcoal suit, gave a thumbs up. "Kill the video," I said. The screen behind me flickered. The image of my weeping wife vanished, and for a moment there was only darkness. The ballroom held its breath, waiting, wondering what would replace the horror they had just witnessed. And then a beam of light cut through the dark, hitting the massive screen. It was not a photo, it was not a video, it was a spreadsheet. It was a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet projected 10 feet high, crisp and clear. The grid lines sharp against the white background, the numbers black and undeniable. A collective gasp went through the room. People squinted, leaning forward, trying to read the columns, trying to understand what they were looking at. It was the ledger of my life for the last 3 years. It was the accounting of every dollar, every cent that I had poured into the bottomless pit of my son's ambition and his wife's greed. I turned to look at the screen, reading the headers aloud, my voice ringing with the authority of an auditor. "Item 1, I said, pointing to the top row, residential lease luxury apartment, downtown Chicago, 3 years. I turned back to the crowd, looking directly at Jamal. "You told your friends you were a successful entrepreneur, Jamal. You told them your crypto investments were paying the rent. You told them you were self-made." I looked at the number in the total column, $144,000. That is the rent I paid. That is the check I wrote every month so you could live in a building with a doorman and a rooftop pool while you pretended to have a job. Jamal sank into his chair, his face gray. He looked like a man who had just been diagnosed with a terminal illness. "Item 2, I continued, my voice relentless. "Portia McCann, lease payments and insurance." I looked at Courtney. She was staring at the screen, her mouth open, her face pale under the layers of makeup. "You told your followers you bought that car with your brand deal money. You did a whole unboxing video. You cried about how hard you worked for it. $82,000. I read the number out loud, savoring the syllables. $82,000 of my retirement money, so you could drive a car you cannot afford to put gas in. The room was buzzing now. The whispers were turning into shouts of disbelief. The investors, the VIPs, were looking at the Vances with new eyes. Eyes that were calculating. Eyes that were realizing they had been sold a lie. Item 3, wedding expenses. I swept my arm across the room, gesturing to the flowers, the crystal, the silk, the food, the very air they were breathing, the venue, the catering, the orchestra, the flowers that Robert here took credit for. I looked at Robert Vance, who was shrinking in his seat, trying to become invisible. $311,000 total. The number was there at the bottom of the screen, bold in black. $311,000. That is the price of admission. I said, that is what I paid to be here today. That is what I paid to sit in the front row and watch my wife be humiliated. I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at them all. You wanted content, Courtney. I asked. You wanted a viral moment. Well, here it is. I gestured to the spreadsheet, to the evidence of their fraud, to the proof of their parasitism. This is the content. This is the reality. This is the financial statement of a bankrupt morality. I looked at Beatrice. She was looking up at me, her eyes shining under the brim of her hat. She was not crying anymore. She was smiling, a small, sad, proud smile. She knew what this meant. She knew what was coming next. I took a deep breath. You said my wife sacrificed her hair. I said, my voice soft now, deadly quiet. Well, today, I am making a sacrifice too. I am sacrificing the illusion. I am sacrificing the lie that my son is a man. I am sacrificing the hope that you people would ever treat us with respect. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I unlocked it and held it up to the microphone so they could hear the beep as I dialed. I am calling the bank, I said, and with that I pressed the button that would detonate their lives. I pressed the button that Stone had set up, the button that would turn off the tap, the button that would bring the darkness. The room was silent, waiting for the call to connect, waiting for the final blow. $311,000, I whispered into the mic, and not a penny more. The light from the projector screen washed over the ballroom, cutting through the dim romantic atmosphere like a police searchlight exposing a crime scene. The spreadsheet was massive, the font size set to 40 bold black numbers against a stark white background. It was the most unromantic image you could possibly display at a wedding reception, and yet nobody looked away. 300 pairs of eyes were glued to that screen, reading the financial autopsy of my son's life. I stood on the stage holding the microphone with a grip that was relaxed but firm. I felt the weight of the moment settling onto my shoulders. It was a heavy weight, but it was a familiar one. It was the weight of truth, and truth is always heavy to those who have been living on a diet of lies. I turned my body slightly so I could see the screen and the audience. At the same time, I wanted to see the numbers. But more importantly, I wanted to see their faces when they realized what those numbers meant. I wanted to see the investors in their $3,000 suits doing the math in their heads. I wanted to see the Vances shrinking into their chairs. I wanted to see the color drain out of Courtney's face until she looked like a ghost in a sequined dress. I pointed to the first row of data, the laser focus of my finger tracing the line across the screen. Item number 1, I said, my voice booming through the speakers, filling the cavernous room. Residential lease luxury apartment, downtown Chicago, 3 years. I looked down at Jamal. He was slumped in his chair, his hands covering his face, trying to hide, trying to disappear, but there was nowhere to go. The spotlight was on him, and it was burning. You told everyone you were a self-made man. Jamal, I said, my voice conversational, almost gentle, but with an edge that could cut glass. You told your friends at the club that your consulting business was booming. You told your in-laws that you bought that penthouse view. With your crypto earnings, you posted photos of the sunset from your balcony with captions about the grind and the hustle. I let the silence hang there for a second, letting the audience recall those posts, letting them remember the arrogance of his online persona. But you never told them who signed the checks, did you, son? I turned back to the screen, reading the number in the total column loud and clear, $144,000. A gasp rippled through the room like a wave. It started at the front tables where the Vances sat and rolled all the way to the back, where the waiters were standing still with trays of untouched food. $144,000. That is more money than most of the people in this room make in 2 years. That is a house in the suburbs. That is a college education. That is a lifetime of security for a family. Starting out, and I spent it on rent. I paid your rent. Jamal, I continued, my voice rising just a fraction every single month for 36 months. I wrote a check for $4,000 so you could live in a building with a doorman and a heated garage and pretend you were a king while you were actually a pauper living on his father's charity. I looked at Robert Vance. He was staring at the screen, his mouth slightly open, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. He had thought his son-in-law was a tycoon. He had thought his daughter was marrying into new money. He did not know. He was marrying her into a subsidy. You thought he was rich. Robert, I asked, addressing him directly, ignoring the gasps from the crowd. You thought he was a provider? Well, he is not. He is a dependent. He is a 32-year-old man who cannot pay for the roof over his head without Daddy signing the lease. I moved my hand down to the second row on the spreadsheet. Item number 2, I said. And this one is for the bride. I looked at Courtney. She was standing near the edge of the dance floor where I had pushed her. She was trembling, her hands clenched into fists, her eyes wide and wild. She looked like a cornered animal. Portia McCann, lease payments and insurance. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. They knew this car. They had seen it on her feed. They had seen the videos of her driving it, wearing designer sunglasses, singing along to the radio, talking about how she treated herself because she worked so hard. You love that car, Courtney, I said, my voice dropping to a low rumble. You named that car. You did an entire unboxing video when you got it. You told your 50,000 followers that you bought it with your brand deal money. You told them it was a symbol of your independence. I looked at the screen, reading the number that exposed her lie. $82,000. The number hung in the air, heavy and accusing. $82,000 of my money, my retirement money, the money I made sweating in a steel mill while you were still in diapers. I paid the lease, I paid the insurance, I paid for the premium gas you put in the tank while you drove around town pretending to be a success. You are not independent. Courtney, I said, my voice hard now, unforgiving. You are a billboard for a life you cannot afford. You are driving a car that belongs to me. You are living a life that belongs to me. The room was buzzing now. The whispers were turning into conversations. People were pointing at the screen, pointing at the couple, shaking their heads. The illusion was shattering. The glamour was peeling away, revealing the rot underneath. The investors were pulling out their phones, probably canceling meetings, probably blocking numbers. The social climbers were leaning away from the Vances, trying to distance themselves from the stench of fraud. But I was not done. I moved my hand to the third line, the final line, the line that represented the very chair I was standing on. Item number 3, I said, and this one is for everyone in this room. I swept my arm across the ballroom, gesturing to the high ceilings, the gold leaf, the crystal chandeliers, the towering floral arrangements that smelled like money and deceit. The wedding expenses. I looked at the crowd, meeting their eyes, challenging them. You are drinking champagne that costs $200 a bottle. You are eating steak that costs $80 a plate. You are sitting on chairs that were rented for $20 a piece. You are listening to a band that charges $10,000 a night. I looked at Robert Vance again. He was sinking lower in his chair, his face a study in humiliation. He had spent the last 6 months bragging about this wedding, telling everyone at the country club how he was throwing the event of the season, telling everyone he was sparing no expense. You took the credit, Robert, I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs. You stood in the church and told me it was worth every penny. You let people believe this was your gift to your daughter. I turned back to the screen and read the final number. $85,000. The number was bold, black, and final $85,000 for a party and to celebrate a lie. $85,000 for flowers that will die tomorrow. $85,000 for a marriage that is based on fraud and vanity. I stepped back from the screen, letting the full picture sink in, letting them see the bottom line, the grand total, the sum of my generosity and their ingratitude. Total financial support over 3 years. $311,000. I spoke the number slowly, separating each word, giving it weight, giving it texture. $311,000. That is the price tag of my love. That is the cost of my silence. That is what I paid to keep the peace, to keep my son happy, to keep my wife from worrying. And what did I get for it? I looked at Beatrice. She was looking up at me, her eyes shining with tears, but she was smiling, she was proud. She saw what I was doing. She saw that I was not just counting money. I was reclaiming our dignity. I got a shaved head. I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. I got a wife humiliated in a bathroom. I got a daughter-in-law who calls my wife a drama queen for crying after she was assaulted. I got a son who told me to put a wig on his mother so he would not lose followers. The room was dead silent. Not a fork clinked. Not a glass moved. The shame in the room was palpable. It was thick and heavy, suffocating the guests. $311,000, I repeated, whispering into the microphone. And you know what the worst part is? I looked at Courtney and Jamal, standing there in the ruins of their reputation. I would have paid double, I said. I would have paid every cent I had if you had just been decent people, if you had just treated us with respect, if you had just loved us. But you do not know how to love you, only know how to take. Courtney let out a scream. It was a primal sound, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. She lunged forward, her face twisted into a mask of hatred. She looked like a demon, her makeup running her hair, wild. "Turn it off!" she shrieked, her voice cracking, breaking into a high-pitched wail. "Turn it off right now, you crazy old man!" She ran toward the stage, grabbing at the air, trying to reach me, trying to stop the truth from shining down on her. "You are ruining everything," she screamed, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the black mascara. "You are jealous. You are a bitter old man who cannot stand to see us shine. Turn it off. Turn it off." She reached the edge of the stage, clawing at the cables, trying to unplug the projector, trying to kill the image that was destroying her life. Robert Vance stood up, shouting at her to stop trying to salvage some shred of dignity. But it was too late. The beast was out of the cage. Courtney grabbed a wine bottle from a nearby table and hurled it at the screen. It smashed against the fabric. Red wine exploding like blood, dripping down over the spreadsheet, staining the numbers, staining the truth. "You are crazy!" she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You are senile. Nobody believes you. Nobody cares about your stupid money. I am the star here. I am the one people follow." I looked down at her, calm, unmoved. "You are not a star, Courtney," I said into the microphone. "You are a bad investment, and today I am liquidating my assets." The red wine dripped down the projection screen like a slow arterial bleed, distorting the black numbers of the spreadsheet until the total sum of $311,000 looked like a casualty count in a war zone. Courtney was panting, her chest heaving beneath the sequins of her dress, her eyes wild and searching for a target. But she had run out of things to throw. She had run out of tantrums. And now she was about to run out of something much more vital. She was about to run out of signal. I did not move from the center of the stage. I did not flinch when the bottle shattered. I simply reached into the inside pocket of my tuxedo jacket and pulled out my phone. It was not the latest model. It did not have 3 cameras or a ring light attachment. It was a tool for business, and business was about to be concluded. I held the phone up high so the 300 guests could see it, so the investors could see it, so my son could see it. The screen lit up, illuminating my face in the dim ballroom. I unlocked it with my thumb and dialed a number I had memorized 30 years ago, the number for the Private Client Services Division of the First National Bank of Chicago. I pressed the speakerphone button. The digital tone rang out loud and clear, amplified by the microphone I was still holding in my other hand. It rang once, twice, 3 times, echoing through the silent ballroom like a tolling bell. "Good afternoon, Mr. Moore," a woman's voice answered, smooth, professional, and oblivious to the carnage she was participating in. Voice verification. Confirmed how. "May I assist you today?" I looked directly at Jamal. He was standing by the head table, his hands gripping the white tablecloth, his face the color of old ash. He knew that voice. He knew that bank. He knew that for the last 10 years, that voice was the sound of his salvation. Whenever he overdrove his account, whenever he needed a bailout, whenever he wanted to play pretend tycoon. I brought the microphone closer to the phone. "Patricia," I said, my voice steady and cold. "Execute the stop-loss protocol immediately." There was a pause on the line, the sound of typing keys clicking in the background, a sound that was louder than the beating of my son's heart. Certainly, sir, the voice replied. Just to confirm, you want to terminate all authorized user privileges on the primary Platinum account. Yes, I said, keeping my eyes locked on Jamal. Terminate the Platinum card issued to Jamal Moore, effective immediately. Done, sir, the voice said, cheerful and efficient. And the joint checking account, ending in 558, I asked. Freeze it, I said. Mark it for fraud investigation. Restrict all access, no withdrawals, no transfers, no payments. Consider it done. Mr. Moore, anything else? Yes, I said. And this part I savored. This part was for the girl in the white dress who thought she was untouchable. Cancel the family data plan, remove the lines for Jamal Moore and Courtney Vance, report the devices as stolen and brick them. There was a slight hesitation on the line, brick them, sir. That is irreversible, I know. I said, do it. One moment, sir. I hung up the phone, but I did not put it away. I stood there waiting. I knew the technology. I knew the speed of the network. I knew that somewhere in a server farm a command was being processed and a signal was being sent. It started with a sound, a small, innocuous sound. Ping, it came from Jamal's pocket. He flinched like he had been stung. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, staring at the screen. Ping, ping, ping. The notifications started coming in rapid fire. A machine gun burst of digital rejection. I could see the light of the screen reflecting in his eyes, his pupils dilating in panic. What the hell? He whispered, but in the silence of the room it sounded like a scream. Notification payment declined for Uber Eats. Notification. Subscription. Canceled for Netflix notification. Gym membership. Revoked. Due to insufficient funds. Notification. Rent payment. Returned notification. Insufficient funds notification card. Declined. Notification card declined. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with the terror of a child who realizes the nightlight has burned out. Dad, he stammered. Dad, my phone says my cards are dead. It says the account is locked. Dad, I have auto payments set up for tomorrow. The car note is due. I looked at him without pity. You do not have a car note anymore, son, I said, because you do not have a car. The repo man has a key. I gave it to him this morning. Jamal dropped his phone onto the table. It clattered against the china, a useless brick of glass and plastic. But the show was not over. I turned my attention to Courtney. She was standing on the dance floor, holding her phone up, trying to restart her stream, trying to reconnect with her audience, trying to find the validation she craved, like oxygen. She was tapping the screen furiously, her long nails clicking against the glass. Come on, she hissed. Come on, you stupid thing. Load, load. She looked up at the router on the ceiling. She looked around the room, searching for a signal, searching for a bar, searching for a lifeline. What did you do? She screamed at me, her voice cracking. What did you do to the Wi-Fi? I did not touch the Wi-Fi, Courtney, I said, my voice calm. I touched the bill. She stared at me, confusion warring with rage. I paid for your data plan, I said into the microphone, explaining it to her like she was a slow child. I paid for the 5G premium unlimited package that let you stream my wife's humiliation in high definition. I paid for the bandwidth you used to destroy my family. I took a step toward the edge of the stage, looking down at her, and I just stopped paying. She looked down at her phone. The screen was black. The little spinning wheel of death was gone, replaced by a message I knew by heart. No service. No, she whispered, shaking the phone as if that would bring the signal back. No, no, no. I had 50,000 people watching. I was trending. I was making money. You were making noise, I corrected her. And now, you are silent. She tapped the screen again and again, desperate tears streaming down her face. My followers, she wailed. They are going to leave. They are going to think I quit. They are going to think you disappeared, I said. And without my money, that is exactly what you are going to do. You are going to disappear. Courtney, because you do not exist without a signal. You are not a person. You are a pixel, and I just pulled the plug. Robert, Vance stood up from his table, his face purple with indignation. This is outrageous. Thaddeus, he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. You cannot just cut them off like this. They are children. They need support. They are 30 years old. Robert, I boomed my voice, silencing his bluster. They are adults who played at being children because I allowed it. And if you are so concerned about their support, then you pay for it. I gestured to the spreadsheet that was still visible on the screen behind me, despite the wine stains. You see the numbers. Robert 3. $111,000, that is the cost of admission. Step right up. Write the check, turn their phones back on, give them a house, buy them a car. Go ahead. Robert looked at the screen, he looked at the numbers, he looked at his daughter who was sobbing over a dead phone, and then he looked down at his shoes. He sat back down. He did not reach for his checkbook. He did not reach for his wallet. He did exactly what I knew he would do. He folded. Because Robert Vance was a man who liked the idea of wealth but hated the cost of it. He liked the status of a rich son-in-law, but he had no intention of being a sponsor. I looked back at Jamal and Courtney standing in the wreckage of their reception. The music was gone. The live stream was dead. The credit cards were plastic scrap. The applause had turned to judgment. They stood there, stripped of their digital armor, stripped of their financial protection, exposed for exactly what they were. Two parasites who had killed the host. Jamal looked at his wife, expecting her to comfort him, expecting her to tell him it would be okay, but Courtney was not looking at him. She was looking at a reflection in the dark screen of her phone, mourning the loss of her audience. "This is what you wanted," I said into the microphone, my voice soft now, almost sad. "You wanted to be famous. You wanted everyone to look at you. Well, look around." I gestured to the room, to the 300 guests who were staring at them in silence. Everyone is looking, but they are not liking and subscribing. Courtney, they are witnessing. I looked at Beatrice. She was watching me. Her head held high, the lavender hat a crown of victory. She was not smiling, but she was not crying anymore. She looked strong. She looked vindicated. I placed the microphone on the stand with a click that echoed through the room. "The bar is closed," I said. And with that, I walked down the steps of the stage. I walked past Courtney, who was still tapping her dead phone. I walked past Jamal, who was staring at his hands as if he had never seen them before. I walked to my wife and I offered her my arm. "Shall we go, my dear?" I asked. She took my arm, and for the first time that day she smiled, a real smile. "Yes, Thad," she said. "Let's go home." We walked out of the ballroom, leaving the silence behind us, leaving the darkness behind us, leaving them in the world they had created, a world without filters, without edits, and without a single penny to their names. The silence in the ballroom was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum, the kind that happens right before an explosion. Courtney was standing on the edge of the dance floor, her chest heaving, her mascara creating black rivers down her cheeks. She was holding her dead phone like a religious artifact, praying for a resurrection that was never going to come. But as the shock wore off, a new emotion took its place. Desperation. And desperation makes people say foolish things. She looked up at me, her eyes blazing with a toxic mix of hatred and entitlement. She smoothed the front of her second wedding dress, the one that cost $6,000, the one I had paid for, and she threw her head back, laughing, a jagged, hysterical sound that bounced off the high ceilings. "You think you can hurt us?" she screamed, her voice cracking under the strain. "You think cutting off a credit card matters? Keep your money, Thad. Keep your stupid allowance. We do not need you. We do not need your charity." She grabbed Jamal's arm, pulling him toward her, trying to physically drag him into her delusion. "Tell him, Jamal, tell him we do not need him. We have our own assets. We have the house." She turned back to me, pointing a manicured finger that was shaking with rage. "We have a home," she shrieked, "$1 million mansion in the suburbs. A house that is in our name, a house where we are the masters, and you are not welcome. Get used to not seeing your son Thad because you are never stepping foot on our property again. We are going to go home to our mansion, and we are going to live our best lives, and you will die alone with your money and your bald wife." The mention of the house made Jamal look up, a flicker of hope crossing his face. He clung to that idea like a drowning man clings to driftwood. Yes, the house. The sprawling estate in Highland Park, the 5 bedrooms, the heated pool, the 3-car garage, the place where he had hosted parties and pretended to be a tycoon, the place he called his castle. I looked at them, and I felt a profound sadness, not for me, but for them. For the depth of their ignorance, I had built that house. I had selected the land. I had approved the blueprints. I had walked the framing, when it was just wood and potential. I had built it as a sanctuary for my future grandchildren, but I had also built it as a fortress, and every fortress has a gatekeeper. I did not speak. I simply turned my head slightly to the right where the shadows were deepest near the service entrance. "Mr. Stone," I said, my voice low but amplified by the microphone that I still held. "It is time." From the shadows, Jeremiah Stone emerged. He walked into the light with the slow inevitability of a glacier. He was holding a black leather document folder, and his face was a mask of professional indifference. He did not look like a guest. He looked like an executioner. He walked up the steps of the stage, his dress shoes making a sharp clicking sound on the wood. He stood next to me, a silent partner in this demolition. Courtney looked at him confused. "Who is this?" she demanded. "Some other senile friend of yours." Stone did not look at her. He opened the folder and adjusted his glasses. He pulled out a document, a thick sheaf of papers bound with a blue legal cover. He held it up, not for her but for the room to see. "Mrs. Vance," Stone said, his voice dry and crisp, like autumn leaves. "My name is Jeremiah Stone. I am the primary legal counsel for the Thaddeus Moore Revocable Trust, and I am here to correct a significant misunderstanding regarding your living arrangements." He walked down the stairs, approaching the couple until he was standing just outside of striking distance. "You mentioned a house," he said. "You mentioned a mansion in Highland Park property, address 147 Oak Ridge Drive, correct?" "Yes," Courtney spat, crossing her arms. "Our house," Stone smiled. It was a terrifying expression. It did not reach his eyes. "That property," he said, consulting the document, "was purchased 4 years ago for the sum of $1.2 million. The deed is recorded in Cook County. The tax records are public." "So what?" Courtney snapped. "That just proves we are rich." "No," Mrs. Vance, Stone said, his voice dropping an octave. "That proves that the Thaddeus Moore Revocable Trust is rich because, you see, your name is not on the deed. Neither is your husband's." Jamal went rigid. He knew this. Deep down he knew this. But he had buried the knowledge under layers of denial and entitlement. He had told himself that living there made it his. He had forgotten the paperwork he had signed the day he moved in. "The property," Stone continued, "is wholly owned by the trust, the sole trustee of which is Mr. Thaddeus Moore. You and Mr. Jamal Moore are classified as occupants." "Occupants!" Courtney laughed, a nervous trill that sounded like glass breaking. "What are you talking about? We live there. We have keys. It is our wedding gift." "It was never a gift," I said from the stage, my voice cutting through her delusion like a knife. "It was a test." I walked to the edge of the dais, looking down at them. I wanted to see how you would treat something that was given to you freely. I wanted to see if you would care for it, if you would respect it, if you would build a home or just use it as a backdrop for your videos. Stone pulled a specific page from the document and held it out. "This is the occupancy agreement," Stone said, "the contract that Mr. Jamal Moore signed 3 years ago. It is a standard lease agreement with one very specific modification." He pointed to a line of text at the bottom of the page. "The rental amount is listed as $0 per month." Stone read, "A gratuitous lease granted at the discretion of the trustee. Essentially, you are guests. You are long-term visitors, living on the charity of a man you just insulted." Courtney snatched the paper from Stone's hand, ripping it slightly, her eyes scanning the text, searching for a loophole, searching for a lie. "This is fake," she screamed, throwing the paper on the floor. "This is legal mumbo. Jumbo, we have rights. We have tenants' rights. You cannot just kick us out. We have established residency." Stone adjusted his cuffs, looking at the crumpled paper on the floor with mild distaste. "Under normal circumstances, you would be correct. Mrs. Vance, eviction is a long and tedious process. However," he pulled another document from the folder. This one was a single sheet, stark and terrifying. "However, this agreement contains a specific clause, a clause that Mr. Moore insisted upon, a clause I rarely include but which seems prophetic today." He read from the paper, his voice clear and ringing through the silent ballroom. "Section 7, paragraph B, the morality and respect clause." The room went deadly silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. "The occupancy of the premises," Stone read, "is contingent upon the occupants maintaining a standard of conduct that reflects the values of the trust. Specifically, any act of violence, abuse, disrespect, or public humiliation directed at the trustee or the trustee's immediate family shall constitute an immediate and irrevocable breach of this agreement, resulting in the instant termination of all occupancy rights." Stone lowered the paper and looked at Courtney over the rim of his glasses. "We have video evidence," Stone said, gesturing to the blank screen where the horror show had just played. We have a live stream recorded and archived of you assaulting Mrs. Beatrice Moore, the wife of the trustee. We have evidence of you shaving her head against her will. We have evidence of you mocking her pain. This constitutes a catastrophic breach of Section 7, Stone said, closing the folder with a snap. The lease is void, the agreement is terminated, you are no longer tenants, you are trespassers. Courtney stood there, her mouth open, no sound coming out. She looked at Jamal, but he was staring at the floor, his shoulders shaking. He knew the game was over. He knew the rules. He had just hoped I would never enforce them. But we just got married, she whispered, her voice small and broken. We have nowhere to go. All our stuff is there, my clothes, my studio, my life. Your stuff, I said from the stage, is currently being packed. Courtney's head snapped up, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. What? I checked my watch. It was a heavy gold timepiece I had bought when I retired, a symbol of time that I owned. I have a team at the house right now, I said, professional movers bonded and insured. They arrived exactly 45 minutes ago when I gave the signal. They are packing your clothes, your shoes, your ring lights, your cameras. Everything that belongs to you is being placed in boxes. You cannot do that, she screamed. That is breaking and entering. It is my house, I roared, my voice thundering. It is my property, and I have the right to remove garbage from my property. I walked down the stairs of the stage, joining Stone on the floor. I stood toe-to-toe with my son and his wife. I gave the movers specific instructions. I said, I told them to be careful. I told them to pack everything neatly, but I also told them to be fast. I looked at my watch again. They should be finishing up the master bedroom right about now. Jamal looked at me, tears streaming down his face. Dad, please, he begged. Where are we going to sleep? Where are we going to go? I do not know, son, I said. Honestly, I really do not know. Maybe you can stay with the Vances. I looked over at Robert Vance, who was staring at the ceiling, pretending he was invisible, pretending he did not have a 4-bedroom house with empty guest rooms. Maybe Robert has room for you, I said. Maybe he will take you in. Robert did not move. He did not offer. He did not speak. He knew a sinking ship when he saw one, and he was not going to let them drag him down. Or maybe I continued. You can get a job. Maybe you can use those crypto skills you brag about. Maybe you can find an apartment you can actually afford. Courtney grabbed Jamal's lapels, shaking him. Do something, she hissed. Do something. He is kicking us out. He is taking our home. It is not your home. Stone interrupted, his voice cold as ice. And you have exactly 60 minutes to get your belongings off the curb. The curb, she whispered. Yes, Stone said. The movers are instructed to place all boxes on the public easement outside the gate once they are there. The trust accepts no liability for weather theft or damage. I looked out the high windows of the ballroom. The sky had turned dark, heavy gray clouds rolling in from the lake. It was going to rain. It was going to pour. It looks like a storm is coming, I said. You have 60 minutes. Courtney looked at the window, then at me, then at her dead phone. She realized the magnitude of her loss. She realized that her designer clothes, her expensive equipment, her entire identity was sitting on a sidewalk about to be soaked by Chicago rain. She let out a scream of pure frustration and ran. She ran out of the ballroom, her heels clicking on the marble, her white dress flying behind her. She did not wait for Jamal. She did not wait. For her parents, she ran to save her things because things were the only distinct she truly loved. Jamal stood there for a second longer, looking at me, looking for a reprieve, looking for the father who had always fixed everything. I looked back at him, and I saw a stranger. Go, I said. He turned and ran, stumbling after his wife, chasing the life that was disappearing faster than he could run. I watched them go, and then I turned to Stone. Is the lock team ready? I asked. They are waiting for your call, Stone said. As soon as the boxes are out, the locks are changed, the codes are wiped, the gate is sealed. Good, I said. I turned to Beatrice, who was still sitting at the table watching the doors where her son had fled. She looked sad, but she did not look broken. She looked like a mother who had finally stopped enabling an addict. I walked over to her and held out my hand. Let us go home, Bea, I said. Not to that house, not to the mansion that was tainted by their greed, but to our home, the small brick house in the city where we had started, where we had been happy. She took my hand. Yes, Thad, she said. Let us go home. We walked out of the ballroom, leaving the Vances, leaving the investors, leaving the $300,000 party to rot. We walked out into the cool air, and I felt lighter than I had in years. I had lost a son, but I had regained my life, and as the first drops of rain began to fall, I knew that the cleansing had only just begun. The storm I had predicted outside was nothing compared to the hurricane that was spinning inside the ballroom. Courtney had stopped running near the exit doors, her flight instinct overridden by a sudden, violent surge of fight. She turned back, her eyes locking onto me across the expanse of the dance floor. She looked at the empty stage where I stood. She looked at Stone packing his briefcase. She looked at Beatrice sitting quietly with her hands folded, and something inside that girl finally broke. It was not a break of sorrow. It was a break of sanity. She let out a scream that sounded like tearing metal, a sound so raw and ugly that guests covered their ears. She hiked up the skirt of her $6,000 dress, revealing the white satin shoes I had paid for, and she charged. She did not run toward the exit. She ran toward me, her hands curled into claws, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated violence. She was no longer a bride. She was a cornered animal, and she had decided that if she was going down, she was going to take the architect of her destruction with her. I watched her come. I did not flinch. I did not raise my hands to defend myself. I have stood on picket lines while strike. Breakers swung baseball bats at my head. I have stared down foremen who threatened to bury me in concrete. A 26-year-old girl in a wedding dress was not a threat to my safety. She was a threat to herself. Jamal shouted her name, trying to grab her arm as she flew past him, but she shook him off with a strength born of hysteria. "Get away from me," she shrieked. "You let him do this. You let him ruin me." She was 20 feet away, then 10. She was screaming obscenities, words that would make a sailor blush, calling me names that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. She was going to claw my face. She was going to try to hurt me. And in that moment, she proved everything I had suspected about her character. She proved that beneath the filters and the hashtags, there was only violence and entitlement. But she never reached me, because I had made a phone call 3 hours ago in the back of a limousine. I had called the precinct. I had spoken to the watch commander, a man whose father had worked the line with me. A man who knew that when Thaddeus Moore called, it was not for a noise complaint. The double doors behind the stage, the ones leading to the service corridor, burst open with a crash that shook the floorboards. Blue lights flashed from the hallway, cutting through the dim lighting of the ballroom, reflecting off the crystals of the chandeliers, creating a strobe effect of chaos. "Freeze, police." The command was shouted by 3 voices in unison, deep, authoritative voices that demanded obedience. Courtney skidded to a halt, her heels sliding on the polished wood. She froze, her arms still raised to strike me, her chest heaving. She looked to her left, she looked to her right, and she saw them. 3 officers in full uniform, hands resting on their holsters, moving with the precision of a tactical team. They did not look like wedding guests. They looked like the law. "What is this?" Courtney gasped, her arms dropping to her sides, her eyes darting between the officers and me. "What did you do?" "Thad." I did not answer her. I looked at the lead officer, a sergeant with graying hair and a face carved from granite. He stepped forward, walking onto the dance floor, his boots heavy on the marble. "Courtney Vance," he said, his voice carrying to the back of the room. Courtney blinked, confusion warring with her rage. "Yes, that is me. Put your hands behind your back. You are under arrest." The room erupted, a collective gasp that sucked the air out of the ballroom. Guests stood up, chairs scraping against the floor. Phones were raised, recording not a celebration, but an incarceration. Arrest. Courtney laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound that bordered on manic arrest. For what? For yelling at my father-in-law. Is it illegal to yell? Now this is a civil matter. This is a family dispute. You cannot arrest me on my wedding day. The sergeant did not smile. He did not debate. He simply reached out and took her wrist, spinning her around with practiced efficiency. He pulled her arms behind her back, and the sound of ratcheting steel cut through the murmur of the crowd. Click, click. The handcuffs were on silver bracelets that matched her expensive jewelry, but carried a much heavier weight. "You are not being arrested for yelling." "Ma'am," the sergeant said, his tone bored professional. "Then what?" Courtney screamed, struggling against the cuffs, trying to pull away, trying to face him. "Tell me what I did." "You are being arrested for aggravated battery of a senior citizen and criminal bodily harm." "Battery," Courtney shrieked. "I did not touch anyone. I did not hit him. He is lying. Look at him. He is fine." The sergeant turned her around so she was facing the room, facing the guests, facing the screen that was still stained with red wine. "We are not talking about Mr. Moore," the sergeant said. "We are talking about Mrs. Beatrice Moore." He pointed to Beatrice, who was sitting quietly at the head table, her lavender hat still perfectly in place. Courtney went still, her struggle ceasing for a moment as the realization hit her like a physical blow. "What?" she whispered, her voice trembling, that was a prank. "In the state of Illinois," the sergeant said, reciting the statute from memory, "shaving the head of another person without their consent is not a prank, ma'am. It is a Class 3 felony. It is considered a violation of bodily integrity, and when the victim is over the age of 60, it is an aggravated offense with mandatory sentencing guidelines." He looked at her with eyes that had seen too much ugliness to be impressed by a pretty girl in a white dress. "You assaulted a 72-year-old woman," he said. "You held her against her will, and you removed a part of her body with a weapon that is battery pure and simple." Courtney's face crumpled, the defiance draining out of her, leaving only terror. "But I filmed it," she stammered. "I filmed it. For my channel, everyone knows it was a joke." Thousands of people laughed. "Exactly," the sergeant said, "and that video is what we call evidence, confession, and motive, all rolled into one." I stepped forward then, walking to the edge of the stage, looking down at her, looking at the silver cuffs binding her wrists, looking at the ruin of her wedding day. "You provided the prosecution with a perfect case." "Courtney," I said, my voice soft but carrying in the silence. "You recorded your own crime. You narrated it. You uploaded it to a server that Stone has already subpoenaed. You thought you were creating content, but you were creating a conviction." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup, turning her into a tragic clown. "Thad, please," she begged, dropping to her knees, the tulle of her dress pooling around her like a shroud. "Please tell them to stop. I am sorry. Okay, I am sorry about the hair. I will buy her a wig. I will pay for extensions. Just tell them to take these off." I looked at her, kneeling there, begging not for forgiveness, but for an escape from consequences. "It is not up to me anymore," I said. "It is up to the state." I looked at the sergeant. "Take her away." The sergeant hauled her to her feet. She stumbled, her heels twisting. She looked back at Jamal, who was standing by the table, paralyzed, his mouth open, his eyes wide with shock. "Jamal," she screamed, "help me do something. Tell them it was a joke. You laughed, Jamal. You said it was funny." Jamal flinched, looking around at the guests, looking at the investors, who were now looking at him with disgust. He realized in that moment that he was an accessory. He realized that his laughter was on the tape, too. I, Jamal stammered, backing away from her, raising his hands. "I did not do it. I just watched. I did not hold the clippers." Courtney let out a wail of betrayal, a sound that was worse than her anger. "You coward," she screamed as the officers began to march her toward the exit. "You spineless coward." I watched them drag her out the white dress, dragging on the floor, picking up dust and dirt. The guests parting like the Red Sea, making way for the prisoner. She was crying, she was begging, she was shouting about her rights, about her followers, about her life, but nobody moved to help her. Nobody stepped in. Robert Vance was sitting in his chair, his head in his hands. Linda was staring straight ahead, catatonic. The investors were already gone, slipping out the side doors to avoid being associated with a felony. The doors swung shut behind her, cutting off her screams, leaving only the echo of her downfall. I stood on the stage alone in the silence. I looked at my hands. They were steady. I looked at my wife. She was safe. I had done it. I had burned the field to kill the weeds. Stone walked up to the stage, standing below me. He looked at his watch. "That went well," he said, his voice devoid of sarcasm. "Is it done?" I asked. "She will be booked within the hour," Stone said. "Bail hearing will be tomorrow morning. Given the nature of the crime and the flight risk, considering she just lost her residence and has no assets, I doubt she will be walking free anytime soon." And Jamal Stone looked over at my son, who was now sitting in a chair, staring at the tablecloth, looking like a man who had woken up in a nightmare. "He is not under arrest," Stone said yet, "but his name is on the lease where the incident occurred, and he is on the video encouraging the act. He might face charges of aiding and abetting, depending on how the DA feels, but socially. Financially, he is finished." I nodded. I felt a heavy stone settle in my chest. It was the weight of a father who has had to discipline a child with the ultimate severity. I walked down the stairs, my knees feeling a little stiff. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me tired, leaving me old. I walked over to Beatrice. She looked up at me, and I saw the relief in her eyes. I saw the love. "Are you okay, Thad?" she asked, touching my hand. "I am tired, Bea," I said. "I am very tired. Take me home." She said. I helped her up. We walked past Jamal. He did not look up. He did not speak. He was broken, dismantled by the truth of who he had married and who he had become. We walked out of the ballroom, past the shocked faces of the remaining guests, past the waiters who were beginning to clear the untouched food, past the wreckage of a $300,000 mistake. Outside, the air was cool and smelled of rain. The limo was gone, dismissed, along with the rest of the fantasy. I hailed a cab, a simple yellow taxi. Whereto the driver asked. "Home," I said, giving him the address of our brick house in the city. As the taxi pulled away, I looked back at the hotel one last time. I saw the lights of the ballroom flickering. I saw the police cars flashing in the distance. It was over. The prank was over. The wedding was over. The free ride was over. And for the first time in 3 years, the silence was beautiful. The police lights had faded into the distance, taking the screaming bride and the spectacle with them, leaving behind a silence in the ballroom that felt heavier than the noise had been. The waiters were moving in the shadows, clearing tables, stacking chairs, their eyes averted, trying to make themselves invisible in the presence of a family tragedy. I stood near the exit, my arm around Beatrice, who was trembling, not from cold but from the aftershocks of adrenaline and sorrow. We were ready to leave. We were ready to step out into the rain and wash this day from our skin. But then I heard the sound of footsteps dragging across the marble floor, slow, heavy steps like a man walking to the gallows. I turned around, and there was Jamal. He looked like a ruin. His tuxedo jacket was open, his tie pulled loose, hanging around his neck like a noose. His face was wet with sweat and tears, and his eyes were hollow pits of desperation. He walked toward us, and for a fleeting second, a foolish, hopeful second, my heart softened. I thought he was coming to apologize. I thought he was coming to fall into his mother's arms to beg for her forgiveness, to tell her he was sorry he had stood by while she was mutilated. I thought the shock of the arrest had finally broken the spell the witch had cast over him. I thought my son was returning to me. He stopped 3 feet away from us. He looked at Beatrice. He looked at the hat that covered her shame, and his lip quivered. And then he did something I had not seen him do since he was a child, begging for a toy in a department store. He dropped to his knees. He did not kneel in prayer. He collapsed his legs, giving out under the weight of his reality. He hit the floor with a thud, his expensive trousers soaking up a puddle of spilled champagne. He reached out and grabbed the hem of my jacket, his fingers digging into the fabric. "Dad," he choked out, his voice thick with mucus and panic. "Dad, please, you have to stop this. You have to fix this." I looked down at him, my face impassive. "Fix what, Jamal?" I asked. "Fix your character, fix your choices. Those things are beyond my repair." "No, Dad." "The arrest," he pleaded, looking up at me, his eyes wild. "You have to call the station. You have to drop the charges. You have to pay the bail," Stone said. "She is going to be held overnight." "Dad, she cannot stay in jail. She is delicate. She is scared." I pulled my jacket from his grip, stepping back, disgusted. He was on his knees, not for his mother, but for the woman who had hurt her. "She committed a felony." "Jamal," I said, cold as the grave. "She is where she belongs." Jamal scrambled forward on his knees, a pathetic display of servitude to a woman who was already gone. "Dad, listen to me. You do not understand. You cannot let her rot in a cell. Not now. Not in her condition. I asked, my eyes narrowing. Jamal took a deep breath and played the card. He had been saving the ace up his sleeve, the card he thought would trump everything else. "She is pregnant, Dad," he whispered, the words hanging in the air, like a desperate prayer. Beatrice gasped beside me, her hand flying to her mouth. A grandchild, the one thing she wanted more than anything, the one dream we had cherished. "She is pregnant." Jamal repeated, his voice gaining strength, seeing his mother's reaction, seeing the hesitation she is carrying. "Your grandchild, Dad. She is 8 weeks along. She told me this morning before the ceremony. That is why she was so emotional. That is why she was acting out. It is the hormones, Dad. She is carrying the future of this family, and you just sent her to a cage." He looked at Beatrice, playing on her heartstrings, playing on her womb. "Mom, tell him you cannot let your grandchild be born in a cell or be under this stress. Stress causes miscarriages. Mom, do you want that? Do you want to kill the baby?" Beatrice looked at me, her eyes wide with conflict, her maternal instinct warring with her pain. "Thad," she whispered, "if she is pregnant." I looked at my wife and I saw the hope flaring up in her eyes, a dangerous hope, a hope that would make her forgive the unforgivable. And then I looked at my son, the liar, the manipulator, the fool. He really believed it. I could see it in his face. He believed he was going to be a father. He believed that this pregnancy was his salvation, his ticket back into the bank account, his leverage to get the house back. I felt a wave of pity for him so deep it almost brought me to my knees because I knew what was in the inside pocket of my jacket. I knew what Stone had given me, along with the eviction notice and the restraining order. I had hired a private investigator a month ago, not just to track their spending, but to vet the woman who was entering my bloodline. I wanted to know everything. I wanted to know her history, her health, her secrets. Because when you build a dynasty, you check the foundation. I reached into my pocket, my hand brushing against the cool paper of the envelope. I pulled it out. It was a thick manila envelope sealed with the red wax of the investigator's firm I looked at. Jamal still on his knees, still weeping, still hoping the lie would save him. "Stand up, Jamal," I said, my voice flat. He shook his head, refusing to rise until I gave in. "No, not until you promise to call the lawyer, not until you promise to pay the bail." "Stand up," I roared, my voice echoing off the walls, making the waiters jump. Jamal flinched, scrambling to his feet, looking terrified. "There is no baby," I said. Jamal blinked, confusion clouding his face. "What? Yes, there is. She showed me the test. She showed me the stick with the 2 lines. She is pregnant, Dad. She is giving us a family. She showed you a piece of plastic that she bought online," I said, my voice dripping with disdain. "She showed you a prop, Jamal, just like the ring lights, just like the rented furniture, just like the fake life you live." I opened the envelope, tearing the seal. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. I pulled out a stack of documents clipped together. Medical records obtained through a court order during the background check. Records from a private clinic in Miami, records that Courtney thought were buried under patient confidentiality laws. But there is no confidentiality when you sign a waiver to get on a reality show. 3 years ago, a waiver she forgot she signed. I thrust the papers at him, hitting him in the chest with the truth. "Read it," I said. Jamal grabbed the papers, his hands shaking so hard the pages rattled. He looked at them, his eyes scanning the medical jargon, not understanding page 3. I commanded. "Look at page 3. The surgical history." Jamal flipped the pages, his eyes darting back and forth, reading, searching, and then he stopped. He froze, his breath hitched in his throat. "What is this?" he whispered. "It is a tubal ligation." "Jamal," I said, explaining it to him like I was explaining death to a child. 2 years ago, Courtney went to a clinic in South Beach. She paid $12,000 to have her tubes tied. She did it because she did not want pregnancy to ruin her figure. She did it because she hates children. She did it because she wanted to be an influencer forever, not a mother. Jamal shook his head, denial flooding his system. "No, that is wrong. This is fake. She wants kids. We talked about it. We picked out names. She lied to you." I shouted, my patience finally snapping. "She lied to you to get the ring. She lied to you to get the wedding. She lied to you to get access to my money. She played you, Jamal. She played you like a fiddle, and you danced to her tune while she laughed at you." I stepped closer to him, pointing at the papers in his hand. "Look at the date, Jamal. Look at the date of the surgery." He looked down, tears dripping onto the paper, smearing the ink. 2 years ago. 2 years before she met you. 2 years before she smiled at you across a bar. 2 years before she told you she wanted to give you a son. She was sterile before she even knew your name. I watched the realization wash over him. It was a physical transformation. He seemed to shrink, his shoulders collapsing, his spine turning to water. The hope in his eyes died, replaced by a horror so absolute it was painful to witness. He realized that every conversation about the future had been a lie. He realized that the pregnancy scare she used to push for the wedding date was a fabrication. He realized that the baby he was using right now to beg for money did not exist, and never would. She sterilized herself to keep her waistline, I said, my voice quiet now, filled with disgust. She mutilated her own fertility to look good in a bikini, and she used the ghost of a child to try and manipulate your mother. I looked at Beatrice. She was crying silently, her hand over her mouth, mourning the grandchild that never was, mourning the cruelty of the lie. She tricked me. Jamal whispered, the papers falling from his hands, scattering on the floor like dead leaves. She said she was late. She said she had morning sickness. She was acting, Jamal. I said she is always acting. There is no reality with her. There is only the scene she is playing. And you were the perfect co-star, the gullible fool with the rich father. I turned away from him, unable to look at his weakness any longer. I walked over to Beatrice and put my arm around her, feeling her lean into me, her strength returning as the truth settled in. She lied about the baby. B, I told her gently. She tried to use your love against you. Do not let her. Beatrice nodded, wiping her eyes. She looked at Jamal and her face hardened. She did not see a victim. She saw a man who had allowed himself to be deceived, who had chosen a liar over his own blood. Jamal looked up from the scattered papers, his eyes red and swollen. Dad, please, he said, his voice a broken whisper. I did not know. I swear, I did not know. I thought it was real. I thought I was protecting my family. You have no family, I said, cutting him off. You chose your family when you stood there and laughed while she shaved your mother's head. You chose your family when you signed that lease. You chose your family when you tried to hustle me for bail money. Using a fake pregnancy, I pointed to the door to the dark, rainy night outside. Go to her, Jamal, go to the police station. Stand outside the cell and tell her, tell her the gig is up. Go be with your wife because she is the only thing you have left. But I have no money, he sobbed. I have no car. I have nowhere to go. Walk, I said. Walk like I walked when I was your age. Walk like a man who has to earn his way back into the world. I took Beatrice's hand and we began to walk away, leaving him standing amidst the medical records and the ruins of his marriage. Dad, he called out one last time, a desperate wail in the empty hall. I did not turn back. I did not slow down. You are a fool, Jamal, I said, my voice carrying back to him without pity, and I do not sponsor fools. We walked out into the night, the rain cooling the heat of the day, washing the streets clean, leaving my son behind to face the storm he had created. The rain was hammering against the slate roof of our brick house on the south side of Chicago, a rhythmic drumming that usually brought me peace, but tonight it sounded like the ticking of a clock counting down the minutes of a life that had been irrevocably changed. Beatrice was sitting in her favorite armchair by the fireplace, a quilt wrapped around her shoulders, her head bare, for the first time since the morning she had refused to put the wig back on. She had refused to hide in her own home. The firelight danced across the patches of stubble on her scalp, casting long shadows that looked like scars. She was sipping tea, her hands steady now, but her eyes were distant, looking at things only she could see. I sat at my heavy oak desk in the study, the door open so I could keep an eye on her. My laptop was open, the screen glowing in the dim light. I had spent the last hour on the phone with the legal team at the social media platform. Stone had threatened them with a lawsuit so large it would make their shareholders weep, and they had complied quickly. Courtney's video was gone, pulled down for violating community standards regarding violence and harassment. The channel was suspended pending investigation. But the internet is a hydra. You cut off one head and two more grow in its place. The video had been screen recorded, it had been shared, it had been remixed. Reaction videos were popping up like weeds. Some people were defending her, saying it was just a joke, saying we were too sensitive, saying we had ruined a young girl's dream. The narrative was fracturing, splitting into 1,000 different shards of opinion. And I knew that silence was no longer an option. If you do not tell your own story, someone else will tell it for you, and they will tell it wrong. I looked at the time. It was 9 o'clock at night, the prime time for the digital world. I opened a new tab on my browser and navigated to a site that Courtney probably did not even know existed. It was the internal communications portal for More Steel and Logistics, the company I had built from a single truck into a fleet of 3,000, the company that moved the iron that built this city. I still had my admin override codes. I still had the master key to the kingdom. I typed in my credentials. The system welcomed me back like an old friend. I navigated to the broadcast module, a feature we usually used for quarterly earnings reports or safety training mandates. It had a direct line to every employee, every contractor, every partner, and every supplier in our network. 50,000 email addresses, 50,000 phone numbers, 50,000 men and women who worked for a living, who knew the value of a dollar and the weight of respect. I activated the camera on my laptop. The little green light blinked on, staring at me like a digital eye. I did not set up a ring light. I did not put on a filter. I did not check my angles. I sat there in my tuxedo shirt, the tie undone, the collar open, looking every minute of my 75 years. Looking tired, looking angry, looking real. I hit the button, marked Go Live. Notifications went out across the country. Phones buzzed in truck cabs parked at rest stops in Ohio. Laptops pinged in warehouses in Detroit. Tablets lit up in shipping offices in New Orleans. The subject line was simple. Urgent message from Chairman Emeritus Moore. I watched the viewer count climb. It did not tick up slowly like Courtney's. It jumped in blocks of thousands. These were my people, they answered when I called. 5,000, 10,000, 25,000, 50,000. I looked into the lens. Good evening, I said, my voice gravelly and deep, the voice of a man who has smoked too many cigars and shouted over too many engines. My name is Thaddeus Moore. Most of you know me as the man who signs the checks or the man who negotiated your pension fund. Some of you know me as the man who fired you when you stole copper wire. And some of you know me as the man who paid for your child's surgery when the insurance denied it. I paused, letting the connection settle. I am not here to talk about steel tonight. I am not here to talk about unions or logistics. I am here to talk about theft. I leaned closer to the screen. Today my family was attacked, not by a competitor, not by a regulator, but by a person we invited into our home. A person we fed, a person we clothed, a person we supported. I held up the piece of paper, the spreadsheet that had been the weapon in the ballroom. This is a ledger, I said. It details $311,000 of my money that I earned alongside many of you. Money that came from long-haul drives and double shifts. Money that was meant to secure a future. I dropped the paper on the desk. My daughter-in-law, Courtney Vance, decided that this money was not enough. She decided that my wife's dignity was a commodity she could sell. She assaulted my wife, Beatrice. She shaved her head on her wedding day, and she broadcast it to the world for profit. I saw the chat box on the side of the screen moving so fast it was a blur. These were not teenagers looking for makeup tips. These were truckers, fathers, mothers, unions, stewards. The comments were short and brutal. They were angry on my behalf. She called it a prank. I continued, my voice rising. I call it a hate crime, she thought, because she had a phone and a following. She was untouchable. She thought the world operated on likes. I am here to tell you the world operates on respect. I picked up the framed photo from my desk, a picture of Beatrice from 40 years ago, her hair a magnificent halo of silver and black. This woman stood on picket lines for you, I said. She organized the food drives when we were striking in '82. She managed the strike fund. She made sure your families ate when the mills closed. She is not content. She is a queen. And today a girl who has never lifted anything heavier than a latte tried to break her. I looked straight into the camera, my eyes burning. I am asking you to set the record straight. Do not let the lie stand. Do not let them say she was a willing participant. Do not let them say it was a joke. Tell them who Beatrice Moore is. Tell them what we stand for. I ended the stream without a sign off, without asking for likes, without asking to subscribe. I just clicked end. I sat back in my chair, breathing hard, the silence of the room returning. But out there in the digital ether, a storm was brewing, a real storm, not a manufactured drama. My phone started buzzing. It was Stone. Turn on the news, he texted. I opened a news tab. The hashtag was already trending, but it was not the one Courtney had started. It was not wedding prank. It was Justice 4B. It was #1 in Chicago, #3 in the country, and climbing. The comments were flooding in from people who knew us, from people who worked for us, from people who respected the code we lived by. My dad drives for more logistics. Nobody messes with Thad Moore. I remember Beatrice. She brought us coffee on the line in '94. That girl is trash. Cancel Courtney Vance. The internet, which Courtney thought was her playground, had turned into a courtroom, and the jury was made up of steel workers and teamsters. Stone called me, his voice sounding impressed. Thad, you broke the internet, he said. What is happening? I asked. The brands are bailing. Stone said, his voice crisp, reading from a screen. Fashion Nova just issued a statement. They are terminating her contract immediately, effective retroactively for violation of the morals clause. The energy drink company pulled their sponsorship 5 minutes ago. They are scrubbing her image from their site. And the makeup line, gone, Stone said. Sephora just tweeted that they do not condone violence or elder abuse. She is toxic. Thad, she is radioactive. Nobody will touch her. Her agency just dropped her via public statement. I listened to the list of casualties. It was a massacre of commerce. Her income streams were being cut, one by one, snipped like the wires of a bomb. Her career, the thing she valued more than her marriage, more than her soul, was evaporating. She is getting notifications right now. Stone said she is sitting in a holding cell, and her phone, which the police confiscated, is probably vibrating off the table with cancellation emails. She is losing thousands of dollars a second. Good, I said. There is more, Stone said, the GoFundMe. What? GoFundMe. Apparently, one of your drivers started a GoFundMe page for Beatrice called the Silver Crown Restoration Fund. It has been up for 20 minutes, Thad. How much is in it? $40,000, Stone said. And climbing. I felt a lump in my throat. $40,000 from men and women who worked hourly wages, from people who knew what it meant to give, shut it down. I said, tell them we appreciate it. Tell them we love them, but we do not need the money. Tell them to donate it to the women's shelter in the city. Tell them Beatrice wants it to go to women who do not have a Thaddeus to protect them. I will handle it, Stone said. Quietly, you did good. Thad, you cleared her name. I hung up the phone and walked back into the living room. Beatrice was asleep in the chair, the stress finally claiming her. She looked peaceful, the firelight softening the lines of her face. I sat down on the floor next to her chair, resting my head against her knee. I watched the fire burn. Courtney was in a cell. Jamal was on the street. The Vances were hiding in their shame, and the world knew the truth. I closed my eyes, listening to the rain, listening to the silence of a house that was safe again. The signal was strong. The message was delivered. Do not touch my wife. The drive to Highland Park was silent except for the rhythmic thumping of the windshield wipers battling the Chicago storm. The rain had turned from a drizzle into a deluge, a relentless downpour that felt like the sky was trying to wash the sin off the earth. Beatrice sat beside me in the passenger seat of my old sedan, her head resting against the cool glass. Her eyes closed, but she was not sleeping. She was listening to the rain. She was breathing in the freedom of the truth. We pulled up to the iron gates of 147 Oak Ridge Drive, the house I had bought 4 years ago. The house that was supposed to be a nest for my grandchildren but had become a den of vipers. The windows were dark, the landscaping was thrashing in the wind, and the driveway was filled not with luxury cars but with 3 large white box trucks. I rolled down the window and punched the code into the keypad. The gears ground. The heavy iron gates swung open and we drove into the belly of the beast. The movers were already at work. They were a specialized team, men I had used for factory clearances, men who knew how to dismantle a life in under an hour. They wore gray ponchos and heavy boots, and they moved with the efficiency of a demolition crew. The front door of the mansion was wide open, propped back with a heavy rubber wedge, and a steady stream of cardboard boxes and loose items was flowing out of the house and onto the lawn. I parked the car so the headlights illuminated the front yard, creating a stage for the final act of this tragedy. Stay here, B, I said softly. You do not need to get wet. She looked at me and shook her head. She reached for the door handle, her hand steady. No, Thad, she said. I want to see it empty. I helped her out of the car, holding a large black umbrella over her head, protecting the woman I loved, while I exposed the lies of the children we had lost. We stood on the porch out of the rain, watching the procession. It was a parade of vanity. Here came a mover carrying a rack of clothes, designer dresses with the tags still on them, sequined gowns that Courtney had bought for events she was never invited to, fur coats that she wore to the grocery store to take selfies. The mover did not walk them to the truck. He walked them to the edge of the driveway and dumped them onto the grass. The rain hit the silk and the fur, instantly soaking them, matting the fibers, turning high fashion into wet rags. Next came the equipment. The ring lights, the tripods, the backdrops, the green screens, the tools of her trade, the instruments of her narcissism. They were piled haphazardly on top of the clothes, a tangled mess of metal and plastic. I watched as a young man carried out a stack of orange boxes. unmistakable, even in the dark. Hermes Courtney had a collection, she called it, an investment. She said the bags appreciated in value. She said they were better than gold. She had 6 of them, Birkins and Kellys in leather and crocodile bags that cost $20,000 each bags, that I had paid for with the checks I wrote for household expenses. The mover looked at me, waiting for instruction. "Throw them," I said, my voice cutting through the sound of the rain. He tossed them. The orange boxes hit the wet ground and burst open the leather bags, tumbling out onto the muddy lawn. They landed in puddles. They landed on top of the soaked furs. They landed in the dirt where they belonged. I felt a grim satisfaction watching them ruin leather. It's tough, but it cannot survive the elements. Not when it is treated like trash. These were the idols she worshipped. These were the gods she prayed to. And now they were just wet leather in a storm. Beatrice watched without expression. She did not flinch. She did not sigh. She just watched the purging of her home like a queen watching the sacking of a traitor's castle. Then I saw headlights cutting through the rain. A taxi pulled up to the gate, stopping abruptly. The door flew open and Jamal stumbled out. He was soaked instantly, his tuxedo, shirt clinging to his chest, his hair plastered to his skull. He looked wild. He looked broken. He ran up the driveway, slipping on the wet pavement, scrambling to regain his footing. He saw the trucks. He saw the movers. He saw the pile on the lawn that was growing by the second. "No," he screamed, his voice thin and desperate against the wind. "No, stop it. Stop it right now." He ran toward the pile, grabbing a wet dress, pulling a bag out of the mud, trying to shield them with his body, trying to save the artifacts of his fake life. "Dad," he shouted, looking up at the porch where I stood dry and untouchable under the umbrella. "Dad, you are ruining them. These are worth thousands of dollars. You are destroying my property." "It is not your property," I called down to him, my voice amplified by the acoustics of the stone entryway. "It is garbage. Jamal and I am taking out the trash." He dropped the dress and ran toward the front door, trying to get inside, trying to stop the flow of items. But a man stepped in his path. It was the foreman of the moving crew, a man named Big Mike, a former linebacker who worked security for me in the 90s. Mike was 6'4" and wide as a door frame. He crossed his arms over his chest, a silent wall of muscle. "You cannot go in there, son," Mike said, his voice a low rumble. "Mr. Moore's orders. Nobody enters. Nobody stays." Jamal tried to push past him, a pathetic attempt that was like a fly hitting a windshield. Mike did not even budge. He just looked down at my son with a mixture of pity and boredom. Jamal backed away, looking up at me again, the rain mixing with the tears on his face. "Why are you doing this?" he sobbed. "Why do you hate me so much? I do not hate you, Jamal," I said, the sadness washing over me like the rain. "I loved you enough to give you everything, and that was my mistake. I loved you enough to cripple you with comfort." I pointed to the pile on the lawn, the mountain of soaked velvet and ruined electronics. "That is not a life, son. That is a costume you and your wife played dress-up for 3 years on my dime, and now the play is over. The curtain has fallen and you have to go home." "But I have no home," he wailed, looking around the dark estate, looking at the windows that were dark and cold. "Exactly," I said. "You have no home because you never built one. You occupied a space, you filled it with things, but you never made it a home. A home is built on respect, Jamal. It is built on love and loyalty, and you sold those things for a viral video." The movers were finishing up. Now the stream of boxes had slowed to a trickle. The house was empty, stripped to the walls. The furniture which belonged to the trust would stay, but everything personal, everything that smelled of Courtney, everything that carried the stench of their entitlement was now rotting on the lawn. The last mover came out carrying a large framed portrait. It was the wedding photo they had taken before the ceremony, a studio shot where they looked like movie stars photoshopped to perfection. He looked at me. "Toss it," I said. He threw the frame onto the pile. The glass shattered with a sharp crack, the sound of their image breaking. I turned to Beatrice. "Are you ready?" I asked. She nodded. She looked at Jamal one last time, her eyes lingering on his shivering form. "Goodbye, son," she whispered, the wind carrying her voice away. We turned and walked back to the car. I helped her in, closing the door solidly, shutting out the storm. I walked around to the driver's side and got in. I started the engine. the headlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating Jamal standing knee-deep in the debris of his life. He was holding one of the ruined Hermes bags, clutching it to his chest like a life preserver, trying to protect the leather from the rain, but it was too late. The water had soaked through. The value was gone, the status was dissolved. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. I did not look at him again. I looked at the gate, the heavy iron gate that I had installed to protect my family. Pressed the button on the remote. The gates began to swing shut slowly, inexorably, the gears grinding the metal, clanging. Jamal looked up. He saw the gates closing. He saw the barrier coming down between him and the house, between him and the money, between him and me. He took a step forward, dropping the bag, reaching out his hand as if he could stop the mechanism with his will. "Dad, wait!" he screamed. "Dad, please, I am sorry." But the gates did not stop. They swung shut with a final resounding boom, the electronic lock engaging with a click that sounded like a gunshot. The lock light turned red. I sat there for a moment, watching him through the bars. He was gripping the iron bars, shaking them, screaming into the night, alone in the rain, surrounded by wet clothes and broken glass. He was on the outside now. He was in the real world, the world where actions have consequences, where rent is due, where respect is earned. I put the car in drive and pulled away, leaving him there in the dark. Beatrice reached over and put her hand on my knee. "It had to be done," she said, her voice steady. "I know," I said. But knowing it did not make the silence in the car any less heavy. Knowing it did not stop the ache in my chest. Knowing it did not change the fact that I had just evicted my only child from my life. But as we drove away from the mansion, as the city lights appeared on the horizon, I felt a shift. The weight was still there, but it was different. It was the weight of a burden, put down, the weight of a duty fulfilled. I had raised him, I had fed him, I had protected him, and finally I had taught him. The lesson was hard, and the tuition was $311,000, plus the cost of a ruined wedding. But maybe, just maybe, it was the most valuable thing I had ever given him. I drove on into the rain, heading back to the city, heading back to the life we had built with our own hands, leaving the ruins behind us, ready to start rebuilding on the solid ground of truth. The sky over the Cook County Jail was the color of a bruised plum, heavy and unforgiving, just like the week that had passed since the wedding. That never happened. I sat in my sedan parked across the street, the engine idling quietly, the heater humming against the damp chill of the Chicago morning. I was not there to offer a ride. I was not there to offer bail. I was there to witness the final collapse of a structure built on sand. I watched the heavy steel doors open and a small group of people walked out into the gray light. They did not look like the VIPs who had strutted into the church 7 days ago. Robert Vance looked 10 years older. His suit was rumpled, his face unshaven, the swagger gone, replaced by the nervous twitch of a man who knows he is drowning. Linda Vance was wearing sunglasses, even though there was no sun hiding eyes that were likely swollen from crying over her lost status. And then came Courtney. She was not wearing white lace, she was wearing a gray oversized sweatshirt, and sweatpants issued by the county, looking small and pale without her layers of contour and false lashes. Her hair, the blonde extensions now matted and dull, was pulled back in a messy bun. She held a clear plastic bag containing her personal effects, the debris of her former life. I knew what it had cost to get her out. Stone had told me the bail was set at $50,000 cash. No bond, because the judge had seen the video. The judge was a woman with a mother in a nursing home, and she had not been amused by the concept of a prank. Robert Vance did not have $50,000 lying around. Not anymore. He had leveraged everything to keep up appearances. So he had done the only thing he could do. He sold his pride. He sold his 2021 Mercedes S-Class to a used car lot for quick cash, taking a loss just to get his daughter out of a cage. I watched as Courtney stopped on the sidewalk, her hands shaking as she ripped open the plastic bag. She did not look for her wallet. She did not look for her keys. She dug for the only thing that mattered to her, the only organ she truly used. Her phone. It had been bricked by me initially, but she had likely gotten a new SIM card or borrowed a Wi-Fi signal inside. She turned it on. Her face, illuminated by the screen, the blue light reflecting in her desperate eyes. I could see her tapping furiously, her thumbs moving in a blur, trying to log in, trying to reconnect to the hive mind, trying to find out if she was still a star. I leaned forward in my seat, watching the exact moment her world ended. She froze. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening in a silent scream of horror. She tapped again and again, shaking the device, hitting the side of it as if it were a faulty television remote, but the screen did not change. I knew what she was seeing. Stone had forwarded me the screenshots from the platform. Administrators. Account permanently suspended. Reason violation of community guidelines regarding violent and graphic content, harassment, and assault. She tried another app. I saw her swipe and tap again. Account disabled. She tried a third. User not found. She had been erased. Digitally. Annihilated. The platforms had not just banned her, they had scrubbed her. They had demonetized her videos, removed her profile, and blacklisted her IP address. She was no longer an influencer. She was a ghost. Courtney let out a shriek that I could hear through the closed windows of my car, a sound of pure existential terror. She threw the phone onto the sidewalk, the device bouncing and skidding across the concrete. She fell to her knees, grabbing her hair, pulling at it, screaming at the sky. "My life," she wailed. "My life is over." Jamal, who had been waiting by the curb, stepped forward. He looked like a shadow of himself, wearing the same clothes he had been wearing the night I evicted him, stained and wrinkled. He had been sleeping on a friend's couch, or maybe in a shelter. I did not know, and I had stopped caring. He reached out to touch her shoulder, a tentative, fearful gesture trying to comfort the monster he had married. "Babe," he said, his voice carrying on the wind. "Babe, it is okay, we can start over." Courtney spun around on her knees, lashing out like a viper. She slapped his hand away, her face twisted into a mask of pure loathing. "Do not touch me," she screamed, scrambling to her feet, getting right in his face, spitting the words at him. "This is your fault. This is all your fault." "Me," Jamal stammered, stepping back, his hands raised in surrender. "How is it my fault? I tried to help you. I tried to get the money." "You are useless," she shouted, shoving him in the chest hard enough to make him stumble. "You are a broke loser with a psycho father. You told me he was soft. You told me he would pay for anything. You told me we were set for life." She shoved him again, and this time Jamal did not just stumble. He snapped the week of humiliation, the loss of his home, the realization of her sterilization, the cold nights on a couch. It all boiled over. He grabbed her wrists, stopping her assault. "I gave you everything," he yelled back, his voice cracking with emotion. "I gave you my apartment. I gave you my car. I gave you my dignity. I let you shave my mother's head, and you laughed at me. You are a joke," Courtney spat, struggling against his grip. "You are not a man. You are a boy, living on an allowance, and now you have nothing. Look at you. You are disgusting." She kicked him in the shin, a sharp, vicious kick with her sneaker. Jamal cried out in pain and released her, but the anger took over. He shoved her back, not with the intent to hurt, but with the intent to get her away from him. She fell back, tripping over her own feet, landing hard on the sidewalk, scraping her hands. Robert Vance roared, charging forward like a bull seeing red. He had been watching passively, but seeing his princess on the ground triggered something in his lizard brain. "Get your hands off her, you bum," he shouted, slamming his shoulder into Jamal. Jamal was not a fighter. He was a lover of luxury. He went down hard, hitting the pavement, rolling to protect his head. Robert Vance, a man who had smiled at my son a week ago, a man who had called him son, was now kicking him. While he was down, kicking the man who was no longer useful to him. "You ruined us," Robert yelled, kicking Jamal in the ribs. "You and your crazy family ruined my reputation. I had to sell my car for this trash. Get away from my daughter." Linda was pulling Courtney up, dusting off her sweatpants, looking at Jamal with a sneer of absolute disgust. "Come on, honey," Linda said, her voice dripping with venom. "Leave him. He is garbage. He has nothing." Jamal curled into a ball on the sidewalk, protecting his face, sobbing not from the pain of the kicks, but from the pain of the betrayal. Courtney stood up, looking down at her husband, the man she had promised to love and cherish. She did not help him. She did not tell her father to stop. She just looked at him with cold, dead eyes. "I want a divorce," she said, her voice flat. "I want an annulment. I want to erase you. I never want to see your face again. You promised me a mansion and you gave me a sidewalk. Get out of my life." She turned her back on him, walking toward the beat-up rental car her parents had arrived in. She did not look back. She did not care. Robert. Vance gave Jamal one last kick for good measure, then adjusted his rumpled jacket. "Stay away from us," he spat. "If you come near my house, I will call the cops. You are dead to us." They got into the car, the engine sputtering as they pulled away, leaving a cloud of exhaust and a broken man on the sidewalk. I watched it all from my sedan. I watched the Vances drive away, cutting their losses, abandoning the liability. I watched my son lying on the dirty concrete, crying into his hands, alone in the world. I felt a pang in my chest, a father's instinct to open the door, to run across the street to pick him up and tell him it would be okay. But I did not move, because it would not be okay. Not yet. Pain is a teacher, and Jamal had been truant for too long. He needed to feel the concrete. He needed to feel the cold. He needed to know what rock bottom felt like without a cushion paid for by me. If I picked him up now, he would learn nothing. He would think he could always fall and I would always catch him. He would go back to being weak. I put the car in gear, my hands gripping the steering wheel tight enough to turn my knuckles white. I looked at him one last time through the rearview mirror. A small, crumpled figure in the rear view of my life. "Stand up, son," I whispered to the empty car. "Stand up on your own." I drove away, leaving him there, leaving him to find his own strength, or to stay down. I drove back to the city, back to the lawyer's office, back to the future I was building for Beatrice. The parasite had been removed, the host was healing, but the scars would remain as a reminder that some prices are too high to pay. I checked my watch. It was time for the final appointment. It was time to ensure that even in death they would never be able to hurt us again. The view from the 40th floor of the Stone & Associates building was breathtaking. The city of Chicago spread out below us like a circuit board of light and steel. From this height, the people down on the street looked like ants scurrying about their business, unaware of the empires being built and destroyed above their heads. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean, glistening under the afternoon sun. But inside the office, the air was dry and serious, heavy with the scent of old leather books and the ink of final decisions. I sat in a wingback chair made of burgundy leather, my hands resting on the carved wood of the armrests next to me. Beatrice sat with her back straight, her posture perfect. She had taken off the wide-brimmed hat, placing it on the table beside her. She was no longer hiding the patches of stubble on her head. She was no longer ashamed. She wore her scars like medals, now proof of a battle she had survived and won. Across the massive mahogany desk, Jeremiah Stone sat with his hands clasped over a document that was as thick as a Bible. He looked at us over the rim of his glasses, his expression grave but respectful. He was a man who had seen families tear themselves apart over a few $1,000s. He knew the gravity of what we were about to do. He knew that we were not just signing a paper, we were rewriting history. "Are you sure?" Thaddeus Stone asked, his voice low and measured, breaking the silence of the room. He tapped the document with a manicured finger. "This is irrevocable. Once you sign this, the trust is locked. The assets are designated and the previous beneficiaries are removed permanently. There is no going back. There is no changing your mind on a bad day. This is the final word." I looked at the document. I saw the title page, "The Last Will and Testament of Thaddeus and Beatrice Moore." I thought about the numbers contained within those pages. I thought about the $15 million that represented my life's work. $15 million was a number that still didn't seem real to me. Sometimes I remembered the days when I had $15 in my pocket and a baby on the way. I remembered the heat of the blast furnace, the smell of burning metal, the ache in my lower back that never went away. I remembered the strikes, the negotiations, the nights I sat up learning contract law so I could not be cheated by the bosses. That money was not just currency, it was my blood, it was my sweat. It was the time I spent away from my wife so I could give her a better life. It was the legacy I had built to ensure that no more would ever have to bow their head to another man again. And I had intended to give it all to Jamal. I had built it for him, I had saved it for him, I had invested it for him. I wanted him to start where I finished. I wanted him to be a king. But a king must have character, and my son had none, I am sure, Jeremiah, I said, my voice steady. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. Stone nodded. He turned the page to the section marked Beneficiaries. He looked at Beatrice. "Mrs. Moore," he said, "are you in agreement with the designation of the primary beneficiary?" Beatrice looked at me, then she looked at Stone. She reached out and touched the document, her fingers tracing the text. "Yes," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Absolutely." Stone cleared his throat and began to read aloud for the official record. The entirety of the estate, including all liquid assets, real estate holdings, stock portfolios, and intellectual property, valued at approximately $15 million, shall be transferred into a charitable foundation to be named the Beatrice Moore Dignity Fund. He paused, looking at us to ensure we understood. The mission of this fund, Stone continued, will be to provide financial, legal, and emotional support to women who are victims of domestic abuse, public humiliation, and assault. Specifically, the fund will provide grants for reconstructive surgery therapy and high-quality wigs for women who have suffered hair loss due to medical conditions or trauma. I looked at Beatrice. She was smiling, a small, sad smile that lit up the room. She had taken the worst moment of her life, the moment her identity was stripped from her, and she had turned it into a shield for others. She was not just a survivor. She was a saint. "We are going to help them, Thad," she whispered to me. "We are going to make sure no woman ever has to feel the way I felt in that bathroom. We are going to give them their crowns back." I squeezed her hand. "We are, B," I said. "We are going to turn that pain into power." Stone turned the page again. The sound of the paper crinkling was loud in the quiet office. "Now," he said, his tone shifting, becoming sharper, colder, "we must address the issue of the natural heir." He looked at me, his eyes hard. Mr. Jamal Moore. The name hung in the air like a curse. "Under Illinois law," Stone explained, "a child can contest a will if they believe they were accidentally omitted, or if they can prove undue influence to prevent this. We must be specific. We must be intentional. We must leave him something to prove that we did not forget him, but rather that we remembered him perfectly." I reached under my chair and pulled out the small cardboard box I had brought with me. It was an old shoebox, the corners taped up, the cardboard faded and worn. I placed it on the mahogany desk. It looked out of place among the leather and the gold, a piece of trash in a palace. "This is for him," I said. Stone looked at the box curiously. "May I open it?" he asked. "Go ahead." Stone lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in a bed of old newspaper, was a pair of manual hair clippers. They were rusty, the metal pitted with age. They were the clippers my father had used to cut my hair when I was a boy, back when we could not afford a barber, back when we had to do everything ourselves. Next to the clippers was a single crisp $1 bill. Stone looked at the items. Then he looked at me, a flicker of understanding crossing his face. "I want this recorded," I said, my voice hardening. "To my son Jamal Moore. I leave these manual clippers so that he may learn the value of doing things by hand, so that he may understand that nothing in this life is electric, nothing is automatic, and nothing comes without effort." I pointed to the dollar bill, "and I leave him this $1 so that he can never say his father left him nothing. This dollar is the seed of his own fortune, if he is the man he claims to be. If he is the entrepreneur he pretended to be on the internet, then $1 should be enough." Stone nodded slowly, a look of grim respect on his face. "It is poetic, Thaddeus," he said, "and it is legally bulletproof by leaving him a specific bequest. We acknowledge his existence and his relation to you, while explicitly limiting his inheritance. He cannot claim oversight. He cannot claim dementia. It is a deliberate and sound decision." He typed quickly on his laptop, adding the specific language to the addendum. "And the terrorum clause," Stone asked. "Include it." I said. Stone typed some more. "For the record, Stone read any attempt by Jamal Moore or any of his descendants or assignees to contest the validity of this will or to impede the operations of the Beatrice Moore Dignity Fund will result in the immediate forfeiture of the $1 bequest and will trigger a countersuit for the $311,000 of misappropriated funds documented in the previous ledger." It was the final nail in the coffin. Not only was I cutting him off, but I was daring him to fight back. I was daring him to try and take what he had not earned, knowing that if he did, I would crush him with the weight of the debt he already owed. I looked at the document one last time. I saw the numbers, I saw the names, I saw the future. "Where do I sign?" I asked. Stone turned the heavy book around, pushing a fountain pen across the desk. It was a Mont Blanc, heavy and black, an instrument of power. Beatrice signed first, her hand elegant and flowing. She signed her name with a flourish, claiming her agency, claiming her legacy. Then I took the pen. The ink was black as night. I wrote my name. Thaddeus Moore, the letters strong and jagged, like the skyline of the city I helped build. I put the pen down, and the sound was like a gavel striking a block. "It is done," Stone said, closing the book. sealing the deal. He stood up and extended his hand. "You have done a good thing today, Thaddeus," he said. "You have protected your wife, and you have served justice." I shook his hand, my grip firm. "Thank you, Jeremiah," I said. We stood up. Beatrice picked up her hat, but she did not put it on. She carried it in her hand, letting the world see her head, letting the world see her strength. We walked out of the office past the secretaries who looked up with respect, past the rows of law books that held the rules of society. We walked to the elevator and rode it down to the lobby. The doors opened, and we stepped out into the bustling street. The sun was shining. The city was alive. I looked at Beatrice. "How do you feel?" I asked. She took a deep breath, inhaling the air of the city. She looked at the people rushing by. She looked at the buildings reaching for the sky. "I feel light," she said. "I feel like I put down a heavy bag that I have been carrying for 20 years. I smiled. "Me too, B," I said. "Me too." I hailed a cab and we got in. "Where to?" the driver asked. "The airport," I said. Beatrice looked at me, surprised. "The airport? Where are we going?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out 2 tickets. I had bought them that morning while she was sleeping. "Paris?" I said. "You always wanted to see Paris in the fall. You always wanted to wear a beret. Well, now you have a reason." She looked at the tickets. Then she looked at me, tears filling her eyes again. But these were happy tears. "Oh, Thad," she whispered. "We are going to spend the money, B." I said. "We are going to spend it on us. We are going to eat croissants and drink wine and walk along the Seine, and we are not going to worry about anyone but ourselves, because we earned it." The cab merged into traffic, heading toward O'Hare, heading toward the future. I thought about Jamal one last time. I thought about him opening that box, finding the rusty clippers and the $1 bill. I hoped he would understand. I hoped he would see the lesson in the rust. But even if he did not, it no longer mattered. His chapter in my book was closed. I took my wife's hand and kissed her knuckles. "Next stop, Paris," I said, and we never looked back. The River Seine moved slowly beside us, a ribbon of black silk reflecting the lights of a city that knows how to love better than any other place on earth. The air was cool, but it was not the biting cold of a Chicago winter. It was a gentle chill, the kind that makes you pull your coat tighter and lean closer to the person walking next to you. I looked at Beatrice, her hand tucked securely in the crook of my arm, her silver hair cut short and chic, catching the glow of the street lamps. She looked younger, not because of the haircut or the clothes, but because the weight was gone. The invisible anvil of disrespect that she had carried for 3 years had been lifted, and she was walking tall again. I stopped walking for a moment, pulling her gently toward the stone railing overlooking the water. She turned to me, her face illuminated by the lights of a passing bateau, mouche, and smiled. It was the smile I had fallen in love with 50 years ago. A smile that held no reservations, no fear, no hidden, no agenda. It was just pure, unadulterated affection. For a long time, I thought my legacy was the company. I thought it was the fleet of trucks, the contracts, the steel. I moved across the country. I thought my legacy was the inheritance I was building for Jamal. I thought that being a good father meant providing a cushion so thick that my son would never feel the hard ground beneath his feet. I thought money was the ultimate insulator against the harshness of the world. But standing there in Paris, I realized I had been wrong all those years. Money cannot buy character. It cannot buy gratitude. And it certainly cannot buy the love of a son who has decided that his inheritance is more important than his honor. But money can buy something else. It can buy a shield. I looked at my wife and I realized that every hour of overtime I worked every holiday. I missed driving a rig. Every fight I picked with union bosses. It was all for this moment right here. It was. To have the power to say no. It was to have the resources to hire the best lawyers to shut down the banks, to hire the movers to close the gates, to protect the queen. I spent $311,000 on a lie, but I would spend every cent of the $15 million remaining to protect the truth. Beatrice touched my cheek, her hand warm against my skin. "Where did you go, Thad?" she asked softly. "You went somewhere far away." I covered her hand with mine. "I was just thinking, B," I said. "I was thinking about how much time we wasted, trying to please people who could not be pleased, trying to buy the affection of people who only saw us as walking wallets." She nodded, her eyes sad but clear. We tried. Thad, she said, we tried our best. We did, I said. But a gardener who refuses to prune the dead branches will eventually lose the whole tree. We cut the branches. And now the tree can breathe. I looked down at the dark water swirling around the stone pilings of the bridge. I thought about Jamal washing cars in the cold Chicago wind, I thought. About Courtney sitting in a cell or a courtroom realizing that her followers could not save her. I felt a phantom ache, the ghost of the father I used to be mourning, the son I thought I had. But then I looked at Beatrice again, and the ache vanished. I realized that peace is not the absence of trouble, it is the presence of justice. I had given them justice, and in return, I had found my peace. I realized that I was not an old man at the end of his life. I was a man who had just cleared the deck, who had just jettisoned the cargo that was sinking the ship. I was lighter, I was freer, I was ready for whatever came next. We turned away from the river and continued walking toward the sound of jazz drifting from a cellar door down the street. The music was lively, chaotic, and beautiful, just like life. I am 75 years old, and I have learned the hardest lesson a parent can learn. I have learned that sometimes you have to break your own heart to save your soul. I have learned that you cannot save everyone, but you can save the one person who matters most. I pulled Beatrice closer to me, her head resting on my shoulder. I love you. Beatrice Moore, I said. I love you. Thaddeus Moore, she replied. And as we walked into the warm glow of the jazz club, leaving the cold night behind us, I knew that we were going to be all right. We had each other, we had our dignity, and we had the truth. And that was worth more than all the steel in Chicago. Moral of the story: respect is the currency of love. Without it, any relationship is bankrupt. Thaddeus taught us that enabling disrespect in the name of keeping the peace only arms your abusers. True parental love is not about blind funding. It is about raising children who understand gratitude and dignity. When you let someone hold the clippers to your life, do not be surprised when they cut you deeply. Sometimes you must be the villain in their distorted story to be the hero in your own reality. Protect your queen, secure your castle, and never apologize for wielding the sword of justice against ungrateful hearts. Generosity without boundaries is not love. It is self-sabotage. Thaddeus Moore's journey reminds us that we teach people how to treat us by what we tolerate. When you allow your kindness to be met with contempt, you are financing your own humiliation. Real power comes not from the checkbook, but from the ability to close it when respect is no longer served. Walking away from toxic family is not an act of cruelty. It is the ultimate act of self-respect. You cannot build a legacy with people who only want to strip it for parts. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let them face the storm alone. Do you think Thaddeus went too far by leaving his son with only $1, or did Jamal and Courtney get exactly what they deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice.